is L'chaim, Agut Yontef, L'chaim, Chag HaGeula, when we're in between the 2 days, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, which is the time that includes both. The Rebbe used to be, usually the Farbrengen was like the night after Yud Beis, which is between Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. So you're both Sai. By Kotchim, it says, Halayla Helach Achar Hayom. The night goes after the day. By other things, the day goes before the night. So we're Yaitza both, because it's the night after Yud Beis, and it's the night towards Yud Gimel. So it has both milas, so it has both in Yonim. Sai, we call it the Kayach and the Bepeil. Yud Beis was not the Gula Bepeil, because he was just notified about it. It was a Tuesday. He was notified that he's free, but the office was closed because of some kind of chagya, some kind of goyish chagya. People try to figure out exactly what kind of chagya is it. What was the chagya then at this time of the year? But I don't even remember what people wrote. They looked into the history and they figured out that besides Rosh Chagya, some Russian chagya there. That wasn't that. They figured out the English date and the goyish date. And anyway, so they couldn't give him the papers. But the next day, that's when he got the official papers and he was officially free. So it's both. This is the Kayach. This is when they gave him the news, which itself is a big thing. And then they told him that then they let him actually go free. And he said the first day when Yud Beis, when he heard about it, he said the Maimer Availi Be'ezri. And then the next day he said, after he got the papers, he said the Maimer Baruch HaGemel. And then when he came Shabbos again, and then he bench came, etc., etc. Anyway, so we have both Mailas. So L'chaim. Well, we should take from Yud Beis Tamuz, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tamuz, what we're supposed to take. L'chaim. First thing is, we make out of Yud Beis Tamuz a big yontif. But the way the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, it's not just so to speak, a yontif for Chassidim, for Chassidim Chabad. He writes in that famous letter that he wrote the first year to the first Yud Beis Tamuz, that this is a yontif for all Chayvim Chava V'Teira and Shem Mitzvahs and Kol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yichuna. It's for every Yid. It's a simcha for Klal Yisrael. And there are people who ask the question, why is it such a simcha for Klal Yisrael? It's a simcha for the Rebbe, and the Chassidim, it's their Rebbe, and the Rebbe was freed from jail, and it was a very harsh sentence, l'chatchila, chas v'sholem, hepech hachayim, and Lepeil, they took it off, and then he went out free completely, Yud Beis Tamuz. So it's a big simcha. No one is denying that for Lubavitch it should be a big simcha. But why is it a simcha, universal simcha, that's for Kol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yichuna? That I want to say, such a shaila is only possible years later. The Shas Maisa, that first year, the whole world, all the Yidden celebrated. There are posters. I actually saw one of the posters that they hung up in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, other places, signed by the Achredi, signed by the Pesach Frank, and by other Daily Yisrael, nothing to do with Chassidim, with Lubavitch. And they hung up that this is a day that everyone should celebrate because it's a day from Frierdiker Rebbe, but they made it into something special for everybody. Years later, when things go regular, I don't mean Dafka now because it's already 93 years later, I'm saying even 25 years later, then that people could ask such a shaila, that why is this something for Klal Yisrael? Actually, I even remember there was once a bocher that came to 770 to learn. He was from a Litvish yeshiva. He came from Kel Teira, and they put him into my room to be my roommate, to be mashpia on him. He came for a year, and once he wrote a letter to Zayde. Zayde was a very big Choshev Erov in Eretz Yisrael, and he left it on the table open. So I don't know why. I believe he left it open, so I should look at it. He left it open on the table in the room. So I just looked at him. So I just wanted to see what it is. So I saw he's writing, and he comes from his background actually is Lubavitch, but he learned in Ponevezh. So he writes to his grandfather. He says, now we're getting to ready for Yud Beis Tamuz, and Yud Beis Tamuz here, they say in 70, this is a yontif for everybody. He says, I don't understand. In asking Shai, I don't understand what's the yontif for everybody. Why is it for everybody? So the first thing we got to know that it is not so. The Rebbe a few times mentioned the Sinyan. And the Rebbe said, the Loshen that the Rebbe said was that at that time, Rav Minyan and Rav Binyan of Yidden lived in Russia. Rav Minyan and Rav Binyan lived in Russia. which we have to make calculations exactly how many Yidden lived in Russia at that time, in Peizayan. But when the Rebbe came out, that there were the majority of Yidden of the world lived in Russia then. And I think that even though, as far as the numbers, the official numbers that's given, that they take, how many Yidden live there, the Rebbe said once, it's not true. These numbers are not real. These numbers are all taken from the people who put into their passport, another passport, the papers, they put in that they're Jewish. But you know how many people did not put in that they're Jewish? They were afraid. So you probably could double the number. Whatever they knew, you could double the number. So Mele, it was Reiv Minyan, a Reiv Binyan of Yidden lived in Russia. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe was put into jail, it was putting in jail basically the whole spreading of Yiddishkeit in Russia. And if not for the Frierdiker Rebbe doing what he did, then the whole Yiddishkeit in Russia would have died out. I mean, Derech HaTeva, the Rebbe should do things, when Derech HaTeva would have died out. And since there was the majority of Yidden lived there, B'meila, this is a simcha for Klal Yisrael, a simcha that happened. We can see that it's all based on the Yudli Stamas of the Frierdiker Rebbe that he went out to jail. And the Mele, he was able to do his work even after he left, that people were following. And then it's all the yisod of what Russia is doing now. The fact that you're able to have such a revival of Yiddishkeit in Russia now is all thanks to Yudli Stamas. The Yontiv is a Yontiv for, it's like a certain stage in the development of Yiddishkeit for Klal Yisrael. So we as Chassidim about they have to celebrate it because there's a din, it's a simcha that happened to your Rebbe. So you have to do it. We find this by others also. The Rambam had a day that he made a yontif for his family. There is the yontif made something, the Shpoler Zayde, and he was saved a certain time from his tzore. So you have to make, the people who are shaychus to him have to make a simcha of it. Also not like people ask, you can't make new Yom Tovim. You could, you see from all these Gedolei Yisrael throughout the generations that made a yontif of their day. But this case is something that's even much more, because this is something that saved Yiddishkeit in Russia, which for all of us here certainly would not have been, if not for you to be Stamos, what would be. But Bechlal, let's say Yiddishkeit in Russia. So this is a yontif that we have to celebrate as a yontif for Klal Yisrael. And that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, that it's a yontif for everybody, for Mechar V'Teira and Shemre Mitzvah and Kol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yichuna, everybody who is called a Yid, because even those people who are not from, but the fact that they're still Yidden and they're still continuing Yiddishkeit has a yesod in what happened to Russia at that time, in the time of Yudei Stamos. So Yudei Stamos is a special day in the Jewish calendar, not only in the Chassidish calendar. So for that, exactly, we have to say L'chaim, Chaim, L'chaim. It's also B'etzem a day that we are madgish the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Rusland. It's a day which we stress, which we bring out the greatness of the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Rusland. Because Bam is the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Rusland, say in the time, that time, at the Frierdiker Rebbe's time, and after he left, all the way till the Iron Curtain fell. All that Mesiras Nefesh is all thanks to Yudei Stamos, and they all got the koyach to the Mesiras Nefesh, all from what happened with the Frierdiker Rebbe, later continued with the Rebbe. So it's a day that we give the credit, so to speak, and we take a lesson in the inyonim of the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Rusland. And that's why Bechlal, by Farbrengen, the Chassidim Farbrengen, and Yudei Stamos, what's brought out is a little bit to get a shtickle picture of what was the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Rusland. That's one side of it. And then there's another side of it. And the Rebbe mentioned this more than once, that the same people that had Mesiras Nefesh in Rusland, why don't they continue the Mesiras Nefesh when they're out of Russia? And the Rebbe spoke about it a few times. What do we need more than the Maimer Bata Tetzaveh? Where one of the things the Rebbe says towards closer to the end of the Maimer is this Inyan, that we see that people that when in Russia they went on Mesiras Nefesh, and then when they came out, so I think I didn't look back to see Medayik. One time says Leikol Kach, it's not so much Mesiras Nefesh that they have the same when they come to the Medina Sarvocha, And I think in one of the places, he doesn't even say the word kolkach. They don't really have this Mesiras Nefesh. So that's a time also to be made again, the Mesiras Nefesh that you're missing. But it's also a time to think about what was the Mesiras Nefesh. And when we think about the Mesiras Nefesh of the Eden in Rusland, it gives us a shtickle kitzel, as we say, that if they were able to be Mesiras Nefesh over there, so we who don't have to have that Mesiras Nefesh certainly should be that Yira Shamayim, that way, Avadim Avadim. So it gives us a little kitzel. So it's good to know. I know there's a Friedrich Rebbe wrote a letter. It's printed in English also, but I saw a copy of the original letter. It was written to Rashag in America. Rashag ran the yeshiva, Temchat Mimim, so the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe wrote in things. So one of the things, we're long glad to giving the instruction about Temchat Mimim, and he says one of the things is that they should learn Divrei Yemei Yisrael, Jewish history. You think, in a yeshiva, you learn Gemara, Rasha, Tosfos, Chassidus. This is a basic in modern schools. They have a subject history, they have a subject digduk, they have all kinds of other Tanakh. We don't, but the Friedrich Rebbe writes you should learn Tanakh, but he writes also Divrei Yemei Yisrael. What's so important to know Divrei Yemei Yisrael? What's important to know Jewish history? It's fine and good. Some people can't learn so much. Let them learn Jewish history. So the Friedrich Rebbe writes, no, you have the classes, learn history, Divrei Yemei Yisrael, and it gives a reason. Because when you learn Divrei Yemei Yisrael, you learn and you hear all about the Mesiras Nefesh that the Yidden had throughout the generations. You learn about the Inquisition, you learn, I don't remember if he gives the examples or not, but he writes this, that it's important to know this because this gives a person Yirah Shamayim. If you hear, when he gave the Mesiras Nefesh of Yidden in Russia, this gives us Yirah Shamayim, pushes us. To a certain degree, it gives us even more than when we learn about Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbe, of the Friedrich Rebbe. Tell you why. I remember when the Rabbi Pliskin moved to America. He was a real Chassidish Sharid. He was one of the best friends, best Chaverim of the Mendel Futterfass in Russia. Then when he left, he came at the anyway, he was in Australia. He lived in Australia. Then he moved from Australia at a certain point. He moved from Australia because he got a job, didn't come to Shamash of 70, whatever. So I once heard from him, he said, when he went into Yechidus, the Rebbe told him that he should make sure to Farbrengen with the Bochrim from time to time. He didn't have a position in Yeshiva, he wasn't a Mashpia. But he was a real Chassidish Sharid. So he said, he asked the Rebbe, what should he talk about? So the Rebbe told him, in your Farbrengen, tell stories. But then the Rebbe added, I don't mean stories of the Rabbeim. Usually we're story about the Rebbe, Meifsim, Tzaddikim. So Rebbe said, I don't mean stories about the Rabbeim. You should tell stories about Chassidim. And the Rebbe explained to him why. Because if you tell something that the Rebbe did, some place, about a tzaddik, a Rebbe could do such things. What does it got to do with me? How could you expect me to do it? But if you tell a story what a chassid did, nishke Rebbe, nishke tzaddik. Nevertheless, the certain things that he did, Mesiras Nefesh, or other kinds of things that he did, this will give a person Yirah Shamayim. This will give a person a thinking. The chassid could do it. So I'm saying when the Rebbe Rai says that you should learn Divrei Yemei Yisrael, and we're talking about Yud Beis Tammuz, so Yud Beis Tammuz really is the time to talk about the Mesiras Nefesh of the Friedrich Rebbe. The Nez that happened, but the Mesiras Nefesh, that's really the bottom line. The Mesiras Nefesh that the Friedrich Rebbe had for Yiddishkeit in Russia. So I'm saying it's also a time to talk about the Mesiras Nefesh that Chassidim had. And it's all connected because the Chassidim got their Mesiras Nefesh from the Rebbe. There's no other way. The Friedrich Rebbe, right in the beginning, as Messias, gathered 10 people, and he made with them a krisus bris. Poshet made with them a covenant. He said, I'm kairos bris with you. I'm making a covenant with you that we should all go to spread Yiddishkeit ad tipas dam ha'achreina, till the last drop of blood. I remember one of these people was Rabbi Shem Tov. So I remember once, I can't tell you the details because I don't know. I was still just 13 years old as a kid. And I was standing by the Farbrengen that before I even got a place behind the Rebbe. And in between the Siches, the Rebbe turned around and I don't know, but Kesher to what, and I don't know, turned around to Rabbi Shem Tov and he said to him, to Rabbi Shem Tov, he said, Irot Keires Bris geben mit dem Rebbe schwer zenit. Twice he said, and he didn't answer. The reason I think he didn't answer is because his policy was that if you don't speak to the Rebbe in front of the Rebbe, you can't say a thing. I don't know. Some people have that sort of, the Rebbe asks you something, how could you not answer? But as other people say, the Rebbe, in front of the Rebbe, you don't answer anything. If the Rebbe says something, you don't say anything. But if he asks, I don't know, but some Chassidim were like that they wouldn't answer. Some Chassidim, but when the Rebbe says one thing, they say that once the Frierdiker Rebbe called over Zalmesha, Tamuz Farbrengen, and said something to him. And when he walked away, someone asked him, what did the Rebbe tell you? So he says, I have no idea. Why not? Because when I couldn't hear a word he said, because every second I was standing in front of him, what went through my mind was, when will the Rebbe take off the holy eyes from my chazisher face? So I guess some people that had in front of the Rebbe, but I remember the Rebbe said these words to him. Because he was one of the 10 people that the Rebbe was Keres Bris. All the Mesiras Nefesh the Chassidim got from Frierdiker Rebbe, from the Rebbeim. It's all one thing. So this is a time also to think of the Mesiras Nefesh that the Chassidim had, which was all because of the Rebbe. And that is Yirzei Seireres. And we know the Mesiras Nefesh they had, they when learned had Chadorim, became Shochtim, and they did everything, and some of them were caught, and some of them were pushed, shot, sent away to Siberia, Siberia, all these, for many, many years. Remember by Farbrengen once, the Rebbe, it was after the Tkufa when a lot of the Rosh Hashanah came out, and the Rebbe made a contest by Farbrengen. He was going to give a bottle of mashke to the Rosh Hashanah that came, but he said, whom should I give? He said, let's make a contest. Who sat more years? And one person said he sat gesessen for 500 Jahre. I don't remember who won. Maybe it was Leis Ananas. He was 19, I don't know, a lot of the years. Then the Rebbe gave him the bottle, and the Rebbe said, when you von Nitzter soll man sitzen, Yiddish it's called sitzen, gesessen in Twisse, sitzen. The Easter von Nitzter soll man sitzen und lernen, sondern sie sitzen und lernen Teire. Now you should also sit, but sit and learn Teire. So their Mesiras Nefesh was mamish that they put their life on the line for spreading Yiddishkeit. We even know that there was one night that they arrested. This is in Tofresh Tzadik Ches. And the Frierdiker was Peizayin. This is Tofresh Tzadik Ches. And Chassidim even called it Tofresh Tzadik Ches, which stands for the word Tirtzach. So they arrested, I don't know if that same one night, 10 Chassidim, but it was around the same time. And this was not like others that they had a trial, a fake trial, but a trial, and the verdict was 10 years in Siberia. Here on the spot, that same night they shot them all. And the Chassidim, I used to hear this from my father a lot because he was in Leningrad then. And they called them the Asora Rugi Malchus. That's what they called them. Remember, my father used to use the Lashon. Chassidim used to say the Asora Rugi Malchus. The Rebbe Nasicha says you could imagine the Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbe sending people on Mesiras Nefesh. As much as the Rebbe was ready to be Mesiras Nefesh himself, but what was harder for him was to send other people to be Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe said it was unbelievable kind of tzar he had. And the case was, and when he sent them, he didn't tell them like something to send, go, and I take achrayus upon myself, nothing's going to happen. He should not say that. He never promised anything in that you're gonna survive. And then when they caught them, they sent them away to Siberia. The Frierdiker Rebbe asked somebody else to go. You can imagine but this was the Mesiras Nefesh of the Chassidim. And they were Mesiras Nefesh on Yerushalayim of them was, and this was, to that time, by the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe was mamish, the biggest sakona. But all the way till the end, it was a Mesiras Nefesh of Yidden in Russia to be officially from yourself was not so. Well, I went to Russia. I went to Russia twice. Once I went with my wife. This was before the Iron Curtain fell, much before. And then the second time I went to the Rabbi Tenna house. So one of the time, the first time I was there, I was speaking to a guy called Kalma Melach. Kalma Melach, Tamarin, I think was his last name. And he was one of the activists there. And he told me that the KGB called him in and they harassed him. They told him, so once he said, I got the kayach and I said to them, I don't know what you want from me. According to our constitution, like the Rebbe said many times, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, according to our constitution, I'm allowed to be frum. I'm allowed to. The main thing was by them, you can't teach children. Also, it depends how big the group is. But officially, the constitution. So, what do you want from me? And I'm not talking now about Tofresh Pei Zayin. This is in something that happened in Tofshin Mem. So he says, know what they answered him? They answered him, yeah, you're allowed to be frum, but you're Lubavitch. Lubavitch was the worst enemy by them, because the Lubavitch is the mamish de l'umazeh of what communism is. Communism is atheism, and Lubavitch is eineg milvade. So they said, yeah, you're different. You're Lubavitch. They still knew that this is their greatest enemy is Lubavitch. And nevertheless, they went and said, Nefesh. And I was there, I'm just tell you the way things were and the way you could see the behavior of people. I asked one of the guys there who was arranging like classes and things. So I asked him, you're not afraid? So he says to me, yeah, I'm afraid. And he says, so what should I do? I'm afraid, but I got to do it. You got to do it. The Hergish of Mesiras Nefesh was so. I mean, the time when we went, it was 100 times less pachad than it was then. But you could have a shemetz menu, at least a feeling, because I always used to hear from my father how it was going, what went on in Russia. Now he himself, he was never arrested because he managed to escape. He was arrested once, taken in, but they let him go. And then he ran away, and then they were looking for him again, and they couldn't find him. So Baruch Hashem, he saved to be caught, to arrested and put in jail. But the way Chassidim were then, you could hear from him. So this was mamish, but to have a shemetz menu you could have from being in Russia in those years, even in the MEMS, the beginning of the MEMS, was also showed. Just to give you a few examples, I know the people from our shul heard it from me more than once, but I know there are other people on. Just to say over, just to give a feeling of the time when, of the MEM time, how it was. I just give you an example. We came there for Purim. Actually, the Rebbe was very, very careful. The Rebbe knew who he's dealing with. Because the people, the shluchim who went before us, shluchim from Ezra Achim, the Rebbe gave them mashke. When I went, I was waiting for the Rebbe to give me mashke. The Rebbe didn't give us mashke. So before I left, I asked Rabbi Groner, Allah Shalom, to ask the Rebbe. So I remember standing outside, he went in after Mincha, and he came out and he said, he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him that he should tell me that since you're going there for Purim, Purim is a day that people drink mashke, and you're going to a Medina Shekule mashke. So by the customs, it's ver nashayla. Imagine how the Rebbe was thinking. By the custom, it's ver nashayla. Why are you bringing in mashke for Purim from America when you're coming to a Medina Shekule mashke? So better don't take mashke along. And he says, tell him, let him take salami, things like that. That's what he said. So Rebbe was very careful. Then he said, when he gave us dollars, he said, first time he wrote it, and then later by dollars, he said, not to change it there, the eifim legally. Because he didn't want it should be any problems. But we came there for Purim. So I remember at night, this was Tainus Esther, so we had a Farbrengen in someone's house that night, Purim at night. So a group of us were going, but we made up that when we go into the house, in the apartment building, to go into the house, we shouldn't all go together. Because every house has somebody there, a guard or some person there watching. Because that's Bechlal, you could see every move that you made. And we're talking the mems, and not talking now in the pays of the tzaddiks. They looked at you. When they say Big Brother watches, mamish, you could see half of the country is an agent of the KGB watching what you're doing. So if you go in a group, they're known that there's some gathering here. So you'll be in trouble. So we made up that 2 people would go in, 5 minutes later, 2 other people would go in, another, to make it not to be so obvious. So remember, that's what we did. We came in, we sat down, cheder, lifnim cheder, like that, closed the door in a room, deep room. There was a mashka on the table. There was some farbais, not too much. I hadn't broken my fast yet, but hey, yes, I didn't want to take food. How much food do they have? So I took a glass of mashka. That was how, because Chagi fast. And we're sitting and talking. There was a guy who was translating. In the middle, there's a knock on the door. A knock on the door to the apartment. A knock on the door meant a knock in your heart. Remember, everybody got white, didn't know what to do. I got scared, obviously. And the host, who was actually Uri Kameshov, he walked out to see what's happening. He was very, very nervous. Comes back. This is what happened. Down there at the bottom floor, when the entrance, there was this Alte Goye. I mean, she must have been 80 years old, an Alte Goye. She realized that there's something going on here. So she went upstairs and knocked on the door to find out. And the first thing they were trained to do is, from Stalin yet, to pick up the phone and call the KGB, call the police. That's the first thing, if you know any gathering. And if they would come, what would be, and they would see a foreigner. The worst thing is a foreigner in their house. So she came in, so he walked into the room, this host, went over to the bottle of mashke, took a glass, and I'm telling you, a big glass like this, filled it up with mashke, turns around to me, spoke in Lashon Kohen, Hebrew, because he couldn't speak English, couldn't speak Yiddish. So he says, Zeh lahamtik adinim. He took a glass of mashke to give her, to quiet her down. She shouldn't call the KGB. So he walks out, a few minutes, he comes back with an empty glass, and he didn't pour it out. She drank it up. And he turns around to me with the empty glass and he says, Od lo nimtaku. She still threatened to go to the KGB. So he took the bottle and poured another glass and walked out, came back with an empty glass, and he said, Nimtaku. And everyone calmed down. Everyone, became calm because, and this I'm telling you in the beginning of the memes. It was, that's how the feeling was. I don't want to go into many stories, but just something that's interesting. One of the things they sent along with us is that's when the digital watches just came out. Just came out then. So they wanted to know, they send packages to Russia, and they put in stuff that if they get it on the black market, they could sell it and probably live 4 months, half a year with it. Came out the digital watch, and they wanted to know how much you could get for that in the black market. 300 ruble or 400 ruble, that was the shaila. So when I came to Getch's house, there was a guy called Yuda, and we made up. I gave him the watch. I said, before I leave back to America, let me know. Wait, the last day he came back to Getcha. Getcha picks up the phone, calls Yuda, and I didn't want to talk on the phone because the phone, were bugged, so they would hear a voice. And he says to Yuda, and I heard it. He said to him, no, what's the answer? He couldn't tell him on the phone, whatever, 300, 400 ruble. Right away, something. So he says to him, Siderinya fu Chabad. He hangs up the phone and he tells me the answer is 300 ruble. Because he said Chabad. Chabad is Chochmah bin Das, 3. So I said to him, in Chassidus it says, sometimes we say that Das is Nichlek L'Shnayim. Das sometimes is Nichlek to 2, Chesed and Gvura. So maybe he meant 4. So, he was gerecht. He says, you're right. Picks up the phone and he says, Yude, no, Das is Nichlek L'Shnayim or not? What do you say? So he says, no, Das is not Nichlek L'Shnayim. So he hangs up the phone. He tells me, it's 300 ruble. It's not 400 ruble. It's 300 ruble that you can get for it. And there are more things. I don't want to go into the stories of our being there, because that's not the purpose of it. I just want to bring out at the feeling we get there when we were there, the Mesiras Nefesh that they had. It says sometimes Bola Lamed V'nim Salamed. Sometimes you come to teach and you really learn. That's what happened here. we thought we came there to teach him at Farbrengen underground. Everything was like underground. But it came out with such a hiseiris from seeing how they were, and this was in those years when the pachad wasn't like chas v'sholom like it was in those years. So you could imagine the Mesiras Nefesh of the Yidden in Russia then, that we have to say, if they had Mesiras Nefesh and they were like this, so what should we do? Anan manene basrei, what should we do? Also, when it's kedai to mention Bechlal, we know the interest and the Rebbe was involved by the Russisch Yidden. It was on his mind constantly, at every Gelegenheit by the Russisch Yidden. There were many times that the Rebbe spoke about the Russisch Yidden and made all kinds of things when they gave the Russisch Yidden, and you could see, and he cried about it. This was on his mind. They say this, everyone heard of it, I don't know how true it is, that when Lezen Anis came out, he told over that Toshin Yud in jail, they told him, the government, the communists told him that your Rebbe passed away. Depends. Some Chassidim, they told your Rebbe in a very not nice way. So yeah, he passed away, he finished. You should know that Lubavitch is over. And some they didn't do that. To him, they told that, and he has a son who took over his son-in-law. And son-in-law is a big Talmudist, and he hates us more than his father-in-law did. That's what he said, they told him. And the story goes, maybe some heard the story with more details, maybe heard different. I know this is the story, I'm not taking achrayas. And the story goes that he went into the Rebbe, and I don't know if he told the Rebbe or the Rebbe asked him to tell him over, whatever, but anyway, he told the Rebbe this word. And the Rebbe looked at him and he said, in other words, he said, I'm not such a big Talmudist, whatever. And he also said, it's not the pshat I hate him more than my shver. In other words, because why should you hate them? You don't hate anybody. The union of communism, besides the tzoras they made, the philosophy of Epicurus, that not to believe in Eibishter, that's what the philosophy, that's the complete opposite. So by the Rebbe, it's like that. But by the Rebbe, the Russisch Yidden were on his mind constantly. And there were many times that things that happened that I remember by the Farbrengens once when he spoke about the Bocher. Everyone knows it, but I'm going to say now, I'm not saying any Chidushim, but I'm just, it's good to repeat the Stammos. It's a time to rethink about these inyonim. And he spoke and he cried a lot. It was Simchas Torah at night. But he got a letter from a Bocher from Russia. And what is the Bocher asking? Bracha for Machshava Zoros and davening. And the Rebbe said, Shtel sich vor, a Bocher doesn't have what to eat. In Russia, what do they have? Zoros, he has everything. When he has finally a chance to have a letter somehow go out from Russia, durchgaven and to come to the Rebbe, what's his bakosha? Machshava Zoros and davening. And the Rebbe was crying, and that's what the Rebbe was crying about the Russisch Yidden, the matzav of the Russisch Yidden. Remember when Zalman Gurevich from Montreal, he used to run the Besrifke in Montreal. He came out of Russia many years before. I don't know how he got up. And he managed to go to Russia. I think it was Ches, I think. He managed to go to Russia. His mile was that he spoke Russian. So I don't know if they knew he spoke Russian in Russia. Could be, I don't remember. I think it's like a matter that he doesn't know, but he understood everything they were saying anyway. So he managed to go, and he finagled in such a way, because they didn't let go only a few places. They wouldn't let you go some places. They didn't let you go. They only went, you were able to go to Moscow, even if you got your visa. Moscow, Leningrad. I went Moscow, Leningrad, and Odessa, which is also one of the biggest cities, but other cities not. He managed to get to Lubavitch, and he managed to get to Rostov in those years. And he was the one that actually brought back the Alter Rebbe's film. So, and then everyone saw it. So he wrote to the Rebbe a whole report, and he came back with a very sad, situation, what goes on in Russia in those years, how the Yidden are, and he met. So I remember he was Shabbos by Farbrengen, and why do I think it was Pashas Ba'aloischa? I'm not sure. And he gave a bottle of mashke, and he started crying. by the Farbrengen. Zalman Gorevich was crying. When he on a board, but really had a heartsick read. And when the Rebbe said L'chaim to him, it was Me'edir the Rebbe. You could see. The Rebbe started crying and started talking about the Russisch Eden. You could see that this was not planned. I mean, you could see that this was not like the Rebbe planned. I don't know. What do we know how the Rebbe planned Farbrengen? That he planned before what he's going to talk about this? I don't know, whatever. But this, you could see it was spontaneous. That since he saw him crying, and it was behemshel to being in Russia by the Russisch Eden, and the Rebbe started crying, and the Rebbe started talking about the Russisch Eden very, very strongly. Then another time when the Mendel Futterfass came. Mendel Futterfass came from Russia, Tovshin Chavdalet. He came out of Russia, Rosh Kislev, to England, and then for Yutas Kislev, he came to the Rebbe already. And he stayed by the Rebbe till after Parshas Yisrei. Shabbos Parshas Yisrei, Rebbe said a maimer. The Rebbe actually, by the Farbrengen, the Sichas itself, the Rebbe spoke about 3 guests that were there. Those years, if there was a guest for Shabbos, everyone knew. It's not like you usually have thousands of people coming every Shabbos. If there was a Shabbos that you had an extra person, a guest, ooh, this Shabbos, this Chosid came. So there were 3 guests at that Shabbos. And the Rebbe, by he spoke in the Sicha, they represent 3 different types of people. Who are the 3 guests? Was Reb Mendel, he was leaving, and Reb Folle Khan, and Reb Zalman Jaffe. And the Rebbe made it into 3 categories. Ayit, it was just in Russia. Ayit, what came out of Russia 30 years ago. And Ayit, which is not from that type, like not American, it's English, but also that type. And the Rebbe made a whole thing about it. But in the Maimer, the Rebbe spoke, what was the Teichen of the Maimer? It was Vaidabel Kimas called Dvarim, but the Rebbe Maimer was chazed over the Maimer of the Mittel Rebbe. There's a Maimer of the Mittel Rebbe that starts off with Lahovin Inyan Lekiches Anshe Chayil. The time the Mittel Rebbe started Kantonisten. And this was big Mesiras Nefesh on many Yidden. And the Mittel Rebbe said Maimer. Actually, someone gave me a copy of, I didn't have that sefer. Now I have it someplace here, of that, a Rishim of that Maimer. Of the Kichas Anshe Chayil. What's his masbir in the Maimer? What's the union? Why the Eibishter made that you should take the Kantonisten and force them and they should go and say, why do you need it? So the Rebbe quoted the Maimer, chazed over the Maimer, and he said in the Maimer, the Mittel Rebbe explains that the Sultan comes to be a Katrik against Yidden by the Eibishter. And the Sultan says that the Yidden, even if they do mitzvahs, but it's not with real feeling. The mitzvahs they do is mitzvahs anoshim ulamodo. They do it out of habit. It's not, they don't have feeling in it. There's no really tainug in doing mitzvahs. So what does the Eibishter do? The Eibishter says to him like this. I'll show you. How's the Eibishter going to show that they have tainug in mitzvahs? So he said, because Eibishter makes it hard for them to do it, basically takes it away from them, makes it that they shouldn't be able to do it. And if they can't do it, they feel so bad. And the Rebbe went through the Lashonos. You look in the Maimon Mittel Rebbe, it says the same thing, but the Rebbe said, and he was crying. And the Yid, who has Hetzoros and he can't do it, right? So maybe oily, alalai, and he's using these words and crying out loud. Oy veili. And the Eibishter shows the Sultan, you see? Look how much tsar they have when they're missing it. We know that tsar and tainug are kavin shkulim. It's all the opposite. Something that if you don't have it, you have tsar, shows that when you do have it, you have tainug. It's two both opposite ends of the same thing. So now that the Yidden have tsar, shows the Eibishter shows them, you see, that when they're doing it, they have tainug. So the Eibishter did that, and the Rebbe applied it to the Russisch Eden. That the Russisch Eden, the Eibishter made this sort of all today that the Eden, when they have tsar, that not able to do mitzvahs, that brings out that they have tainug. So, Yud Tamuz is a time to think about this. And the Rebbe, Kosov, it was the Rebbe who worked, and the Rebbe, we could say, we could say it. Some people say, how do you know? The Iron Curtain fell, the Rebbe knocked it down, just like Purim Tovshin Yud Gimel and Stalin paid it because of the Maimer, and that the Rebbe acknowledged. Chassidim always said, but when the Maimer came out, the second Maimer, whatever was Magia, that Maimer years later, in the Pesach Dover, it says that this has to do with the fact that Stalin died. So the Rebbe put in that Farbrengen in the Maimer, and when Stalin died, it became already a little bit less problem. Not only that, there were other problems. Before, whatever there was, Gzeiras they wanted to make. So the Rebbe, with the Russisch Eden, worked so much, and I heard from somebody, again, anything that I don't know from firsthand, I can't say, but I heard years ago, I heard this 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that there was somebody, he went into Yechidus, and not a Lubavitcher, and he said to the Rebbe, you have shluchim all over. What about Russia? Why don't you have shluchim in Russia? So the Rebbe said to him that more could I have a shliach than I have a shliach in the Kremlin. Yet a spy in the Kremlin, and probably worked on making it easier for the Eden. But the Rebbe worked so much that Shavuos Tovshin Chavdala that everyone knows. When the Rebbe finished the Sikha, no one sang Genigen, no one said L'chaim. That was very upset. And the Chazer over, because the Chazer over many times. So this is what we have to think about Yud B'Stamot. But by the direct thing is thinking about the Mesiras Nefesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And here the Rebbe goes into interesting that he said the Frierdiker Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh was divided into 3 chalokim. 30 years of his Messias, each 10 years was a different level of Mesiras Nefesh. They were all Mesiras Nefesh, but a different level of Mesiras Nefesh. On a different Farbrengen, the Rebbe said that if you make a cheshbon, how many days he sat in jail, so the days that he sat in jail fits to the days of his Messias. Let me just think. I remember when he said this to Farbrengen in Sufshin. He said that the days made a cheshbon, the days, because it's from Tes Vov till Yud Gimel. So it's 29. Right? Make the cheshbon, like maybe not to the minute, but I think it's against the same amount of years of his Messias. I think that's what he said. Anyway, but the Mesiras Nefesh said when he was in Russia for 10 years, which is about 10 years, these are not exactly 10 years, from Tov Reish Pei till Tov Reish Pei Ches. It's, he says, 8 years. The Mesiras Nefesh was the Mesiras Nefesh prepared. Pasha the Mesiras Nefesh, Pasha his life was in danger. And then the other 10 years, he was in Poland. And here at Mesiras Nefesh also, here was Mesiras Nefesh from the outside, from the enemies. And the way that Rebbe used the Lashon, the Mesiras Nefesh was, this was a place where was a kele to spread Chassidus. All Poland was full of Frume Yidden, and to spread Chassidus. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had a lot of problems. Frierdiker Rebbe had problems from the Eigene Mensch, not Lubavitchers, from Chassidim, from other Chassidim. And the Rebbe used the Lashon that by Yekanu Beyechov, same Lashon says by the Alter Rebbe, that one of the things by the Alter Rebbe was not only because of the Misnagdim, by Yekanu Beyechov, the other Talmidei HaMagid. The main Talmidim were with the Alter Rebbe, there's no question about it, the Melech and the Bzusha and the Baditchever. I mean, all the main Talmidim, but there were 120 Talmidim, many of them were against the Alter Rebbe Shittah. But to Oviv, Shomer Asadover. For Oviv goes on the Magid, Shomer Asadover. He was waiting for the Alter Rebbe because the Alter Rebbe knew that. And the Rebbe used the same Lashon on the Frierdiker Rebbe. By Yekanu Beyechov, but he knew that Oviv, Shomer Asadover. The Oviv, the Rebbe touched Oviv, the Eibishter, Oviv Shebashamayim. Shomer Asadover, he was Shemer, and he knew that this is the right thing as the Eibishter wants, but it was Mesiras Nefesh. And it's at the emes is, it's not spoken about so much because it's not Negei. Mesiras Nefesh of the Eden in Russia is Negei to Chazer over and Chazer over of the Rebbe in Russia. Chazer over, it's Negei to know Poshet Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit. But here, it's not really spoken, even in the Sikha, the Rebbe does it, the Kitzer. But if you talk to people who, I mean, now, unfortunately, we don't have so many of those that were there those times, you hear. Look in the Zechrenas that he wrote, Blazinski, Rabbi Blazinski. Not the one that just passed away, his father. because he was from the Polish Talmidim there, and he went to spread Chassidus, and he had only tzoros. People didn't let him, and it was gamish. Also, I heard from my mother-in-law. They were in the city in Poland called Vyshkeve, and there was all other Chassidim. And her father was Chaimea Lis, he went to Lubavitch when he was not even bar mitzvah, and he became one of the big Chassidim. Frierdiker Rebbe said, the Imre Bine is Fardir. I mean, he came back from Lubavitch, he started giving a Tanya share, so they put him in Cherem. It's like a ton Lebedik dirt, and it was also, so this, and the Frierdiker Rebbe went to Mesiras Nefesh to spread Afot Samayonis. And then the last 10 years is the Mesiras Nefesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe here in America. And he says that's a different Mesiras Nefesh. Each one has, he said, the main Mesiras Nefesh is in Russia. But to a certain degree, the second Mesiras Nefesh with Eigen Mensch, with Eigen Frum Eden, it's a harder thing. And in America, Mesiras Nefesh against the Strom, that's what the Rebbe says. The Kegen Strom, the stream is one way and you have to fight it. It's not easy. It's a different type of Mesiras Nefesh, but and we all know when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, everyone was against him. The Rabbonim here were against him. The people that were against him. Besides the people that told him that, England macht Tzliach here, from Steinreden, he said, I mentioned it by the other Farbrengen. The day he came, they told him, some Rabbonim told him, Azevi David wachsen hard, just like hair is going to grow here, you're going to make America in a Mokum Torah. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, you can imagine, I didn't say anything to them, but you can imagine how I couldn't sleep the whole night. Imagine telling that you didn't get Nispol. But he had all kinds of tzoros. And people, there were even some people who said against certain things, somebody who was, so the Frierdiker Rebbe opened the Wednesday hour, the release time, he was against it. So they asked him, what's wrong with it? Why are you against it? What's wrong with taking kids out for an hour from public school and teaching them Torah? So he said, I mean, why was the Frierdiker Rebbe Makarev so much Harav Yolis? And then the Rebbe had Giyarshan this thing? Because he was one of those people that did not go against, and he said he was behind the Frierdiker Rebbe. I don't know if he actually helped a lot, but he definitely was, and that was a big yichus. And the Frierdiker Rebbe went on Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe, he said this Mesiras Nefesh is greater than the other Mesiras Nefesh of the first one. So Al Capone, usually Tamuz when we celebrate the Frierdiker Rebbe's birthday, but the day he went out of jail, so it's celebrating Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe says that we have to learn and we have to do Mesiras Nefesh to learn. Now it's a different type of Mesiras Nefesh. It's not Mesiras Nefesh. You don't have to give up your life. It's Mesiras HaRotzen. Nefesh is Rotzen. You have to give up your Rotzen. Nishton, not to do. And I'm not saying it to anybody. I'm saying it to myself because who am I to say to people? But I'm just trying to convince myself not to do only was mir Wilzach. You have to do something a little bit, giving up the Rotzen. The Rebbe times would make like a comment about people nowadays who think they're doing a Mesiras Nefesh. Actually, the Rebbe gave over a message to me when we went to Russia at that time. I'll say it over. So we went to Odessa. And in Odessa, we visited the family. Oh, we got there. And there was a husband and a wife there. And there was someone in Russia gave us a book written in Russian about Jewish women that was supposed to be translated or something. And we had it, and the guy who gave it to us said, be very careful, because if you're caught with this book, mainly we had our own svarim, which they took away anyway. You could say, you brought for yourself, but we don't speak Russian. So what are we doing with the book in Russian and Yiddishkeit? So he said, never leave it in the room, because if you leave it in the room, they check your room when you're not there, and they'll find it. Wherever you go, take it with you. Also, let your wife hold it, not you, because it's less chance that they're going to search your wife. But as long as we had this book, which we had to bring from Moscow to Odessa, those few days, the hearts had geklapped. Because if they catch us, go straight to jail. It even happened, we're going in a taxi, and this guy Yuda was with us in the taxi, and we were talking, which language? Talking in Hebrew. And the taxi driver passed the red light, and the policeman stopped him and called him out, took him out. So the Yuda tells us, sometimes when a driver sees that in his car, in his taxi, there's something fishy going on, he specially goes through a red light, so the police should stop him, and then he tells them, go check them out. So you never know. He said, this might be happening now too, because he heard us speaking in Hebrew. So it took 10 minutes, and he was outside there. I don't remember ever being scared like I was scared those 10 minutes. Because he said, yeah, they're gonna, if he did this, they're going to come and they're going to check you. And then the pale mama stuck it past the red light. It wasn't this thing, but it was so, anyway, and we took it to Odessa. We came to Odessa. They told us, when as soon as you come, give it to the guy and tell the guy to run out of his house and hide it someplace behind the house, because you'll see the police will come right as soon as you come in, they'll go follow you. The pale came to Odessa, they didn't follow us. They were there already before we got there. The KGB was standing outside before we got, anyway, that's not what I'm trying to bring. I'm trying to bring out, so the lady was there and we saw a baby laying in the crib who was about a half a year. You could see about a half-year-old. So the mother, talking to the mother, so the mother says that the baby was born about 2 weeks before Yom Kippur. So that's about it, a half a year before. In Odessa, there was no mail. So any person, a few people who there wanted to do a bris, had to travel to Moscow and to do an underground bris. So she tried to go. But usually they go when the babies are a few months old. First of all, the baby is not so small to travel such a long trip. Also, the mother just had a baby, so she's not well yet. But she says to us in all sincerity, but I was thinking to myself, how could I allow my child to pass Yom Kippur without a bris? So I have to go before Yom Kippur. She tried to make a reservation on the plane. There's no reservations. She took a train, which was close to 24 hours one way, had the bris done, took the train, right after the bris, took the train back and came back before Yom Kippur. But she said in such sincerity, such pashtas, how could I have my son without a bris before Yom Kippur? When Yom Kippur passes. It's one thing. Then the second thing, we're talking, where do you go to the mikveh? There's no mikveh there. She says, where do I go to the sea, the Black Sea? I said to her, the Black Sea, middle of the winter? Now everyone knows the Black Sea does not freeze. It doesn't become ice. I think because it flows, whatever. But it's freezing water. Mom, it's freezing water in the middle of Russian winter. So she says, yeah. Tapashtes. Didn't even make a fuss over it. Yeah, I go on Mesiras Nefesh, and I go into the freezing water. Tapashtes. But that's what you got to do. You got to do it. There's nothing to talk about. Remember when I came back, it was a Friday. I wrote to the Rebbe a short Kitzadik report, and I wrote it. I'm going to write a wrong report after Shabbat, sit down and write it. I meant, this is such, it's a Mirazei der Numan, I had to write this to the Rebbe. I had to write these two things she said. I was so tumult, I wrote and I forgot. I gave him the letter. Later, so I called up Rabbi Groner and I say to him, I meant to write this to the Rebbe, I forgot. If you get a chance, tell it to the Rebbe. This was Friday. Friday night, it was in the 70s. People tell me Rabbi Groner is looking for him. I find him. Yeah. I told this to the Rebbe, and this is what the Rebbe said. So, Zogem, to tell me, soll das erzählen zu the Higebale Mesiras Nefesh. Let him tell this to the people here who think they're going on Mesiras Nefesh. To show what Taich Mesiras Nefesh. This is, anyway, so the Rebbe wants us not to go on Mesiras Nefesh, Chas v'Sholem, regular Mesiras Nefesh, but the Mesiras Arotzen, to do what the Rebbe wants, to do yourself what you're supposed to, with others, learn a little more Chassidus, learn at this more abissal, zayin abissal eder, abissal abrechton sich. That's, in other words, we're so used to hear that we do whatever's comfortable. It doesn't have to be that comfortable. If it's something has to be done, something like that. That's the lesson that we have to take from Yudis Tamuz. So l'chaim, we should take what we have to, and yehi rotzen sheyifol advarim biyu b'Hashemim. L'chaim. I think we can sing a niggun. We're waiting for Rabbi Yossi Lew to come on because he's going to be the main Farbrengen today.
Not the main, Rabbi Shapiro. You're the first. You're the main, and thank you.
I'm the first. Yeah, okay, true.
We're not finished with you. Please don't run away.
No, I'm not running away.
We gave you an hour. We started a couple of minutes late, and it's 10:58, so you still owe us a couple of minutes. I just want to share before I ask you to maybe a couple of short minutes, and Rabbi Lew, who's in Detroit. So I told him he better be on his A game because Rabbi Shapiro, you were amazing. So we warned him. I just want to say one quick thing is that the year that you went with Rabbi Tenenhaus to Russia for Purim, Rabbi Tenenhaus runs a very, very big Purim festival every year, very big Purim event. So he brought me and Shmuley Gnevish, who I saw was online, the two of us to run the show. But Rabbi Tenenhaus didn't trust us because we were young Bachrim. So he brought Rabbi Bistin to be the spiritual overseer. I know Rabbi Bistin's on, and I don't know if he remembers this. And Rabbi Tenenhaus, who's a master at PR, had all the news stations there to cover the event, the big Purim festival, which is the biggest Purim festival in the world. So the news anchor pulls me and Rabbi Bistin over and says, we're going to interview both of you. One, we're going to ask, what about Purim? Tell us the story of Purim. And the other one, we're going to want to know, what's the schedule events tonight? Rabbi Tenenhaus is with you with the Etch-a-Sketch, right? When you went, you guys were scared to talk because of the KGB, so you were talking with like the kids.
Right.
I remember I was very involved when you went. Anyhow, so the news reporter comes and pulls me and Rabbi Bistin over, and I say, okay, Rabbi Bistin, you do the spiritual, the religious stuff, and I'll tell them what happens. All of a sudden, the TV goes on, and they say, Rabbi Pinny, tell us about Purim. I said, no, I'm supposed to tell you the schedule. They said, no, tell us about Purim. So they switched it on me, and I had to all of a sudden start my rabbinical career by talking about Purim, and Rabbi Bistin got to tell the schedule. So that was just an incident when you went for Russia.
Actually, when talking about the Russia, when we went with him, we had a Farbrengen in Russia, Purim at night in Marina Rosh Shul, the old Marina Rosh Shul. And imagine, outside, we had the one person standing guard. And we made up that he should, if he sees the KGB coming, he would run in and tell us, and we would change. But we were sitting there every time, the whole time by the Farbrengen, afraid. Who knows, they might come, because this was in a public place. Baruch Hashem, they didn't. But every time there's some kind of move. So this reminded me of all the stories that they would sit to, and so on. That was when I was with him. That was the second time. Yes.
And yeah, so that time I must have impressed Rabbi Tenenhaus enough that he allowed me to come and become the shliach of Southwest Broward. And in our shtickle, it's to why we're all here tonight. So a good Yom Tov and a l'chaim to everyone. Rabbi Bistin, you remember that day when you were in charge of the festival there? L'chaim, Rabbi Bistin, and to everyone, a good Yom Tov.
I think we should try to sing. We always try by this type of Farbrengen. It's hard to sing.
If you want, I can probably mute
everybody to sing the Tamuz Farbrengen. Let's sing the Tamuz Farbrengen.
So give me just 1 second, Rabbi Shapiro, because I do want to, first of all, thank everybody here. I want to thank all the shluchim of Florida for joining me and helping put on all these events. This Wednesday night, we're going to be doing a Siyum Rambam. I put it on COL. Every Wednesday night since the pandemic started, we started a featured class. Tonight especially, I want to announce a couple of announcements. First of all, tonight is dedicated to a very special friend of us who just had a big did on Notzach, and he should have continuous bracha and atzlacha to Mordechai ben Sarah. I want to dedicate tonight to him. Also, a shliach in Florida who's been doing amazing work and is our point man in the capital, Chabad of Tallahassee. I want to wish a Yom Haledes, Hashnas Bracha, Atzlacha to our colleague, Shneir Erchman, Shneir Zalman ben Ilana, and wish that his son, Baruch Shmuel ben Chana, who we've been davening for, should have a refuah shlema. So I thank again, and Rabbi Biton from the Mogen David Shul in North Miami, and all the Chabads, thank you very much for helping make this night such a hatzlacha. We have over 300 people who've already signed on just on Zoom, and I'm sure there's many, many more on Facebook. Let me see if I can unmute everybody. So I'll tell you what, I just allowed everybody to unmute themselves. So everybody, if you don't mind, if you want to be mishtatif in singing, as Rabbi Shapiro just requested, we should all sing together the Yud Beis
Tamuz Farbrengen, yeah.
Beis Tamuz Farbrengen, and then afterwards we will have Rabbi Yossi Lew, who's in Peachtree City, Georgia. It sounds like somebody has somebody stop coughing before the Whoever's talking, you better social distance. Kevin, start the nigga.
Start. If you throw, start the nigga. If you be stomach. Unmute everybody.
Rabbi Shapiro, with all due respect, that didn't sound so great. I don't know if that experiment was a good experiment.
I know it's hard and business. I know from.
One second, Rabbi Shapiro. I need to unmute you. Rabbi Shapiro, that wasn't such a good experiment.
It doesn't matter.
We should have gotten a choir because some of these guys, I don't know, it was.
No, it doesn't work together. It doesn't synchronize. Whatever the word is. Anyway.
Okay, I just hope that our next speaker speaks better than we sing.
Let's try it.
Rabbi Yossi Lew, you're on. Oh, you know what? Ruvi, you want to sing? Maybe we'll ask Ruvi. Ruvi, you want to sing a niggin? I asked him to unmute. He didn't unmute yet. But Rabbi Shapiro, you're right? You're here.
I'm here, yes.
And Rabbi Lew, you're here, right?
I am.
Welcome. Rabbi Lew is in Detroit. He's the mashpia for Gan Yisrael over there, so that's why he joined us late. But we look forward to hearing your words of inspiration. Rabbi Shapiro is also unmuted, so the two of you now could take over. I was just the facilitator. A good yontiv and bracha v'atzlacha in everything you do, and take it away.
Amen. A good tavach, Rabbi Pinny and Rabbi Shapiro, and all good friends. A good tavach, a good yontiv, and thank you very much. I unfortunately missed the best part of tonight, according to Pinny. Rabbi Shapiro's Farbrengen. Rabbi Shapiro's Farbrengen is always the best part. But I only heard mamish the last maybe 30 seconds, a minute. And Rabbi Shapiro was saying about the Mesiras Nefesh. That's obviously what Yud Beis Tammuz leads us to. And I think that the biggest Mesiras Nefesh that we could ever possibly imagine is happening right now, as 26 years after Gimel Tammuz, we're still in this Gimel Tammuz phase, and we're being asked to continue on It's expected of us to continue on. Halt sich zusammen. And for 26 years, it's Churban Beis Hamikdash. It's Yud Beis Tamuz Tavshin Mem Daled. At the Farbrengen, at the end of the fourth Sikha, the Rebbe said then the famous line that if somebody is alive and sees the Beis Hamikdash burning, even if he has a heart made of stone, what a gekehrte Welt. And so the Gemara says that whoever the Beis Hamikdash wasn't built in his life, as if it was destroyed. And so the Rebbe screamed out, Mikidas Liboy. Beis Thomas is about Keren Welt, which is what the Frierdiker Rebbe asked. And so here we are in a time of Mesiras Nefesh, which is a very difficult and problematic situation. And I can't imagine the Rebbe could have been more proud of us that we sit together all these years later, and we're just waiting and hoping and doing everything to Tatzvos Kent, and believing that it's happening, it's going to come. And so in my travels and in my discussions and Farbrengens with different people, different communities, the question is always asked. I was asked this question today by one of the staff members of the camp, and that is, it's all good for you. You can go back in time and remember, you can listen to a Farbrengen, and you could remind yourself that you were there, etc. What about us people who never saw the Rebbe, we never heard the Rebbe, we never had any interaction with the Rebbe? And so that's, I couldn't really answer the question, regel achas, that takes a Farbrengen. But I said to myself, I think that's a good opening to Farbrengen among Chassidim, among Anash, among friends, this Yud Beis Tamuz. It's demanded a Mesiras Nefesh of all of us to stick together and finish the job that the Rebbe wants of us, even after so many years.
That's just cut it in half. With your teeth, cut it in half and
that just means that everybody is standing in a tnuah of Mesiras Nefesh these days, and we're pretty good at it. But that point hurts. The people who didn't see the Rebbe, or people who were not old enough to have memories of any kind of value. And I want to talk about, it's this year 70 years from Yud Shvat. I want to talk about 70 years from the Rebbe. And I told the story before, and to Dafka, Florida, Farbrengen, but it's kedai to discuss it again and to talk about this and expand this Nakuda. On Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe's 70th birthday, I was just under 8 years old. I remember the tumult, I remember the shturim. Yud Aleph Nisan was on Sunday. My father went, like Erev Pesach, left home and went to New York for Shabbos, Shabbos HaGodel, and then Sunday was Yud Aleph Nisan. I was at the Shidur, I was at the Farbrengen in London, but I spoke Yiddish, but there was nothing in the Farbrengen that I could remember. And then a few years later, I was about 13 or 14, and I started going through the Hanachas that was in my father's library. And I came across the Yud Aleph Nisan, Hanacha, the Dalfis is Shnas HaShivim, Tavshin Lamed Beis, and over there it says that the Rebbe said the Maimer in the Hanacha, and right after the Maimer it says Nignu B'char Hashem Chasisi. They sang the Nigun B'char Hashem Chasisi B'is Eiridus Gedelu, the greatest Eiridus, and the Rebbe said the following Sikha after that. What is the Sikha after that? So the Rebbe says then that there is something that he wanted, the Rebbe wants to wegstellen, he wants to establish in a powerful way, and he was waiting for, he's waiting for an inspiration. So the Rebbe says that this nigun, obviously the Rebbe wasn't referring to the Maimer, the nigun that they sang was something that the Rebbe was waiting for. And the Rebbe continued in that sikha that he was asking to establish 71 new institutions in honor by the next year Alfnissen, and for his 71st birthday, and throughout the year of 71, Ayin Aleph. And the Rebbe said this in response to people who were asking him to slow down and to take it easy, to retirement, and a very, very beautiful geschmacke, interesting, sweet sikha. And then the Rebbe said he wants 71 Moses. And when you listen to the tape or you watch the video, you sort of hear this gasp. It's not a gasp, but you sort of hear like this. And the Rebbe immediately said, you don't have to be scared about this kind of thing. You'll start working, it'll happen. And many more than 71 Moses were established by the next year Alfnissen, obviously increasing the Rebbe's work beyond measure to what it was before. Now, I'm reading this line that it says that they sang this niggin with a great asceticism, and there is no page in any other hanacha anywhere which has a line like that. That they sang a niggin with asceticism, and the Rebbe responded to that asceticism, and I wanted to understand, what does it mean that they sang this niggin with his asceticism miyuchada? How does that express itself? Like, how do you explain that? So I went to my father, I opened up the book, and I said, oh, it says over here about this asceticism miyuchada. What went on? And my father started oohing, oh boy, that was unbelievable. It was an amazing experience. I said, okay, well, what happened? Like, what did they sing it? Did they jump up and down? What was different than any other time where they sang in niggin with a lot of levity? Oh, you can't compare it to anything else. It was amazing, but there was no Osius. There was no explanation. And I wasn't able to get any kind of explanation. And so I asked other people. There are other people who were there. And when I got a little older, I was already 17, 18, I was in New York. I asked all kinds of people that I knew, and no, everybody answered the same way. Oh, it was amazing. I can't describe it. It was unbelievable. And then in the early Mems, Mem Beis, Mem Gimel, Mem Dalet, they started selling tapes. WLCC, the World Lubavitch Communication Center, was selling tapes from previous years. Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph was on tape then. They took a bunch of Farbrengens from the big reel-on-reel tape, and they put it on cassettes, and they were selling it. So I immediately went and bought Gedalfnis Tafshin Lamed Beis so I could hear the song. And for whatever reason, those days, they did not record the nigunim. They maybe recorded 30 seconds of it, and it was off. This nigun went on for a long time, 25 minutes to a half hour. You hear 30 seconds of it. Very disappointing. There's nothing you can tell from the tape. And so I continued on with my life, and this was a part of the history that I could not figure out what could have been so special. And then somebody gave me a very big gift about 10 years ago. And this gift included all of the available DVDs of the Rebbe at that time. Today there's a lot more that's come out, and it's much more professional. But these were like DVDs of entire Farbrengens that I guess were pirated or taken. I don't quite know, but this was a gift given to me. And so I came home that evening about 12:30, and I opened up this case that contained all these DVDs. And the first thing that I looked for was something really unique. And I stopped at Tes Shvat Tafshin Lamed, Mashiach Sefer Torah. There can't be something more dramatic than that. And so there was about an hour-long footage of that. And so about 1:30, I finished with the Mashiach Sefer Torah, and I went to the Yud Aleph Nissen Tafshin Lamed Beis, forwarded straight to the end of the mimer, and you see that they sing L'cha Hashem Chasisi. It was not the first time they sang that nigun. Whoever was started the nigunim started something else, but L'cha Hashem Chasisi sort of, it just came. It had to happen. And the Olam started singing it, and the camera keeps on going back and forth. The entire 25 minutes is on footage. And you see that the Rebbe does encourage the nigun every couple of minutes, maybe 2 or 3, 4 minutes. But the response of the Olam, the way that people were responding, was completely shaloi be'erach. You can compare it to the way when the Rebbe was encouraging the niggin that was Lebedik, but it remained Lebedik. And every single person there is jumping up and down. There's even the notorious non-singers at the Farbrengens were all like everybody. At some point, the people from down below were standing and like they were dancing. Even the old guys behind the Rebbe were clapping, and the entire 770 is just moving up and down. Rabbi Mentlik, who never sang at any time, because the bracha, the Rebbe could have been putting down the cup, and Rabbi Mentlik, that he was so buckled to the Rebbe that he was just standing like a soldier. There's footage of him looking around with this big smile on his face. Like you can feel that there is electricity in the air. You can see it. And I watched the whole thing, 25 minutes of it, and then I rewound and I watched it again. And during the second time of watching it, I suddenly jumped up and I got caught up. I felt myself there. You could call me a nutcase, and you might be quite right, or a fanatic or whatever it was, but I felt like I was there. And while I was standing up and jumping and dancing like everybody else, it dawned on me what was going on there. And what came to me was that every single person, and I know there are people who are on this Zoom right now who were there, that everyone who was there was screaming, "I love you." They were screaming to the Rebbe a love. There was an ava there that just burst out. It was this Ashreinu Atev Chalkeinu, a thanks to the Eibishter that we have this incredible bracha in our lives. There was no other way. I felt that. And I'll be honest with you, I had tears streaming down my face, and this went on. And the next thing I know, it was 5:30 in the morning. I watched it again and again and again to see it, to capture it, to experience it. And then after this, I went to all the people. I went to my father. I went to Yossi Hecht. There are different people that I know who I had asked originally. I said, would you say that this would be accurate? That the people over there were screaming, "I love you." And everybody, not one person said to me, no, we didn't say that. That wasn't this. That was the exact sentiment. That was the feeling that the people who were there really, really were expressing at that time. And the Rebbe said, "You love me? Oh, good. Now you're going to get to work for real." That was the response. The Chabad, they was waiting for this kind of insight. Obviously, what the Rebbe was saying, I recognize what you're doing, and Yasher for coming. Now get to work. That was the feeling that I have. And if anybody has any, want to slug me up, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you that, but I felt like, I personally felt like I was there. And this led me to think something else. But Perel Mamish, I wasn't there. I wasn't there. But I was familiar with the Sikhs. I've learned the Sikhs. I've listened to the Sikhs. I've read the Sikhs. Sai in Yiddish and Sai in the newer version now. I'm familiar with every part of that Farbrengen, till the Hadran, everything. And the whole theme of the Farbrengen and the way the Farbrengen developed, 6 hours, moederdike Farbrengen, very yesodistic Farbrengen. But I wasn't there. But somehow I managed to dump myself in there. I managed to climb in there because I wanted it. I felt this, I just felt this move and the hazazah just from trying to experience Farbrengen and try to understand what was the feeling there, what was going on. And so I thought about the following. Imagine if somebody told you that you have an opportunity to go back one moment to be with the Rebbe. Look, when Mashiach will come, it's Terech Hadasha. Nobody knows what's going to fly over there. Are we going to get our old places back at the Farbrengens? How is it going to work? All these questions nobody knows. No one knows. Halavida let us in. That's at least that. But from the past, we do have an idea we were there. Or at least we can watch the videos and feel like we were there. So if somebody gave us an opportunity to go back in time, and you can spend whatever you want with Rabbi. You can go back to your favorite Farbrengen, Yud Shvat Toshin Yud Aleph. You could go back to Tkiyas, you could go back to Akofis, you could go back to Yechidus, you could go back to, anything you want, the Sidorim with the Rebbe, whatever you want. Somebody gives you an opportunity to go back. What would you choose? And I'm talking to people who were there. You have one moment. And to people who were not there as well. What would you, a lot of people say, when I ask this question in the public, a lot of people say they would go back to Yechidus. You have to spend a moment, to spend a minute or 2 minutes at the Rebbe, just you and the Rebbe, you can feel whatever you want, you can say, you can do, you could experience. A lot of people choose that. Personally, I was in Yechidus Baruch Hashem many times, and I had that experience. I would like to go back to an experience, and not only I wasn't there for, but I can't even imagine, because I have no precedent, I have nothing to compare it to. In all Lamed days, I could compare it to the hundreds, thousands maybe of Farbrengens that I was at, but I can't compare the one thing that I was not zeicher to have, and that is on Simchas Torah night that the Rebbe would teach a nigun. I can't imagine standing there and hearing Shamil's nigun. Ata b'chatonu. These are not just nigunim. These express the Rebbe and the Rebbe's essence. A nigun is a kulmus halev, is an expression of the heart. What was it like? I was never there, and anybody who I've spoken to cannot really describe it. Were the Rebbe's eyes open or closed? Was the Rebbe singing with his hands? Where were the Rebbe's hands? There's so many different questions that are technical questions, really. They're not, but that creates an image in the person's mind. Unless you were there, it's hard to imagine that. And if you were there, who was looking at the Rebbe's hands? You were engulfed by this incredible expression of gaguim or simcha or whatever the nigun was. It's just like imagine the tune, Anim Zmiris. These are such powerhouses of nigunim, and they so express the Rebbe there. There's the Rebbe written all over them, especially a nigun like Ata B'Chatonu, that has in it like so many different sides and so many different meanings and so many different expressions. I wasn't there. So it's very difficult for me to put myself there. The Rebbe was standing on a bench, on a milkwach, in which part of the shul exactly, and under what, next to who. These are all what was Hanukkah doing, what. These are all technical questions, not real questions, but that enables a person to imagine the maimed, to imagine the opportunity. That's a very difficult thing. So my response to people who say, I was born too late, I wasn't able to be in Yechidus, I wasn't able to get a doll, I wasn't able to be at a Farbrengen, I wasn't able to be at the Starim with the Rebbe, Nigunim with the Rebbe, whatever it might be, is always, I feel the same way. I missed kacha v'kacha. I missed quite a few different things over there. I was born a little, maybe 25 years too late. My father asked me, would you like to be 80 years old these days? And I said, I wasn't thinking that. I was just thinking about my personal feelings about something that I missed. And I can't even imagine getting it back. That's, I imagine, how somebody who were born after the Gimel Tammuz, how that person would feel. But the thing is, you don't have a video HaKafas, and you don't have a video of Tkiyas, and you don't have a video of the Starim, and you don't have a video of the Rebbe teaching a nigun. But you do have videos, and from every single angle, of Farbrengens, and Sichas, and Tfilas, and other parts that can bring a person to experience that. So, Yid Aleph Nisan Lamed Beis, it happened to me. I I was there, so to speak, virtually there or whatever, but I really felt it. I mamish felt it. And a ganze Nacht. And to those who were there, I shared this with them, and they see, nobody disagreed. So far, I haven't found anybody who said, no, that was not the feelings. So, I think I might have, arrived over there, which means that I would safely say that anybody, even somebody after the Gimel Tammuz development, who was standing all in a tenur of Mesiras Nefesh, and it's demanded of us to feel, to be a chassid, we have the opportunity to connect to the Rebbe, not just because we're learning his Torah. That's obvious. You can connect to the Alter Rebbe that way. You can connect to Moshe Rabbeinu, Teretz Tzivon Moshe. The chiddush here of Deir Shvi is that we actually have videos of the Rebbe teaching Torah, the Rebbe saying a maimer. Imagine if once a week you put on your hat and your kapata and your gartel, and you just put on a maimer. A maimer can take 20 minutes. Stand there, watch it, learn it, absorb it, read it before, and then hear how the Rebbe says it. Do it once a week, do it once a month. Rosh Chodesh, you take out the maimer, or a sicha, something that you learned, something that you heard about, something that somebody described. You could connect, you can mamish be there. I know that because I did it and I continue to do it. I don't take out a video every Motzei Shabbos, but almost every Motzei Shabbos I take out some Farbrengen, which is connected to that time, and I go to the Maimer. The Maimer was always very, very himmeldik. The Maimer with a niggin dafka. And just listen. Lav dafka you'll understand. Lav dafka you'll be able to follow. It's sometimes it becomes a little over your head type of thing. It's okay. Just to hear the sing-song, the niggin before, and to hear the Rebbe singing. If you see the Rebbe saying the Maimer, the Rebbe's the head down, and the hachonas during the niggin, how the Rebbe prepares himself, and then the Maimer itself, and the Rebbe's like in a different, as if the Rebbe just dropped down from heaven. It's really unique and special. It's a Maimer. That's a herkish. You can do that with a sikha, you can do that with dollars, you can do that with so many different things. And each time you do it, something in there will touch you. Something, a word, a vort, this type of thing. This Maimer, the Rebbe said something that I was learning, I was thinking, I was needing, these kind of things. They mamish happen. That's called Deir Hashvi discussions. That's all we have now, but we have it. You do not have that from any other Gadol B'Yisrael in history. And we're not talking about history here. We're talking about our Rebbe. And we're talking about Mesiras Nefesh because it's difficult and it's the challenge how to educate our children and how to get them involved. You have the Living Torah that we watch on Motzei Shabbos. In my house, it's Chok B'Liyad. I will not make Havdalah until after it's over, until after the video. And when the video is on, I've been finished, turn off all the lights. And I ask everybody in there, do not say a word. You have to say something, hold it until it's 15 minutes, that's it. But in that way, the connection to the Rebbe is real. At least during the time with the Rebbe Farbrengen, nobody said a word. There was no questions and answers. There was no interaction. There was no like, oh, I have a thought. Can I share a thought? Can I share a vort, please? It was the most rare thing that the Rebbe even asked somebody else to speak on a very, very rare occasion. Rebbe asked Rabbi Palti, who was leading the campaigning against the New Yehudi problem, to say a few words. And on Yitzvat Tashin Lamed Vav, Rebbe asked several Rabbanim to get up and talk about that. So it was so rare. Rebbe asked Zalman Shimon to talk about a tiny choice and Tashin Mem. This was very, very unusual that anybody should say a word. And so why should we say something when the video of the Rebbe is playing and we're all trying to focus on what's going on there? So the idea is somehow to be connected. The Mesiras Nefesh is still definitely there, because the bottom line is, when the video screen is turned off, it's terrible. I remember when the first Farbrengen was given out by Jem on a video, and we spent 4 or 5 hours transported to this world of Torah, this world of mitzvah, the world of the Rebbe, the world of Ufgehebenkeit, this elevation that you feel when you were at Farbrengens, that everyone who was there, if you hooked in, you were elevated, you were inspired to a point where you were like, thank God the Rebbe elevated me here. I remember one Shabbos after Farbrengen, and after Mincha, it was one of these really, I think it was in Mem Zion, maybe Mem Vav, and one of these really heavy, uplifting Farbrengens. And I walked outside and I was like looking, I didn't land. I hadn't landed. And that's the koyach of a Farbrengen. The Rebbe took you person to heaven during a Farbrengen. And so this Farbrengen on the video of Jem went on. And then the Simcha says, the Rebbe leaves. And all of a sudden, this video was produced by the fall, the down-to-earth club. This wasn't real. This was only a video, but in reality, it is real, because the Rebbe left this for us. He allowed them to do this so that we should have this now, not just to remember, but to re-experience and to relive and to be part of it. And so the Mesiras Nefesh stays, because after the video, you're to open up your eyes and you're right back where you were before. But this time, the Rebbe elevated you even a little bit. And you came away with some kind of inspiration, some kind of point, some kind of idea that you can take with you, and you can feel that, I need to do this next time again, because I was put into the right place now. I was taken to I was elevated to the right place. So from the one hand, we demanded a great Mesiras Nefesh, and Lubavitch is pretty good at Mesiras Nefesh. We all know that the MS is right here, and nobody's running to anywhere else. But for our sake of ourselves, every once in a while we need this. And for the sake of our children, even more. And for the sake of our grandchildren, even more than even more. They should know that it's not stam a thing that we remember, but it's a thing that we kochsef, that we are involved, we are engaged, and we continue to be engaged. You were there at the Farbrengen of Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis, my friends, was almost 50 years ago. It's a long time. And you remember the Farbrengen, good. You don't remember every word of the Farbrengen. You don't remember the Ket Chazan and Maima B'Yem Ashley from Yudalef Nisan Lamed Beis, in addition to the Lamed Aleph one. So there's something to be found in every single one of these Farbrengens, and try it. When you try it, you make a achlota and you try it, not stam to watch, but to be mamish involved, you'll see that you will have at least part of that experience. And at least the children should know that this is with them letman, not just with the memory, but with the actual doing of it. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim, Yossi, big yashikoyach. Rabbi Shapiro, get ready, you're back on, because we promised that the Farbrengen goes till 12. So we will, is Rabbi Lew on? Let's see if Rabbi Lew on. We're going to try a different.
Hey, I wanted to tell a story that okay. you were involved with this story.
I'm not rushing you. Hold on, let me unmute Rabbi Shapiro.
Rabbi Shapiro, I'd like to hear his rebuttal.
Yossi, give me a second. I do want to wish 2 people a happy birthday. I got messages. So I want to wish one of my colleagues, my dear colleagues and partners, Rabbi Chaim Lipsker of the Shul of Downtown, a happy birthday. And from Facebook, I got one of my Balabatim, who I share with Rabbi Biston, Alan Levine. Today's his birthday, 47 years since his bar mitzvah. So I want to give him a shout out and wish him a Meledis, a Shnas Bracha V'Atzlacha, a year of blessing and success. Rabbi Biston, I see, is writing his name down to run after him. Let me get the next donation, okay? You got the last one. The other thing is, I just want to say before we hear your story, and then we'll have Rabbi Shapiro continue. And we don't have to stop, by the way. My Zoom count is unlimited, so we don't have to stop at midnight. Especially we have Australia. We have lots of Australia, Rabbi Roosevelt, Rabbi Tenenbaum, Sruli and Levi, so we could keep on going. It's only morning there. But I will say that Wednesday night on the same link, and you'll see it on COL, and crownheights.info, they both advertise it as well. We're having a very, very special evening, again, a global lecture on Siyum Rambam and Mashiach. So we hope we have a young rising star who's going to be one of our guest speakers. So we hope you'll join us. Rabbi Lew, tell us your story. It better be a good one. And then we go to Rabbi Shapiro. Don't go.
Hold on. Let's see if Rabbi Shapiro has something to add to what I just said.
Rabbi Shapiro, your rebuttal.
I unmuted, yes. No, I think it's very good what you said. You mean from that Farbrengen? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We hear you.
You mean about the Farbrengen from Tov Lamed Beis? That's what you're talking about. It's like you said. It's like you said it.
All right, there you go. So, guys, it can happen. That's all. I don't think I'm any more special than anybody else. And I felt it. I'd experienced it. Try it. At least try it. If you don't feel it, you'll learn something for sure. And you'll spend a couple of hours with the Rebbe. That's sicher good. When you get to the Maisa, this is a murderdika Maisa that happened about 13 years ago. Pinny and I were in Poland we were on the southern region March of the Living. And we were the rabbis, the shluchim, that went with the students there. And we were going to spend the Shabbos in Krakow. And just a couple of months before we were there for the Shabbos after Pesach. So for a couple of months before, new shliach, who's today the veteran shliach there, Eliezer Gurari, the son of Yechon Gurari from Cologne. So he was the shliach appointed to Krakow. So I called him up a few weeks before. We got permission, Pinny and I think Pinny got this permission, to take 15 students, 15 of the kids, with us to the Mar Shul in Krakow, which was then the shul that Gurari was in, and then to go back to his house for the Shabbos for Farbrengen. And so I called Gurari, and I said to Gurari, we're going to be there this Shabbos Shmini, and we want you to put on the table, via staff design, the whole business, the fish with the chocolate, the kugel, which should be a spread. We'll take care of you for that Shabbos. And we want to bring 15 kids to your house and bring with them. And Kachava, we gave the guy about $1,000, maybe some more. And we went to the shul to daven. After davening, we took these 15 kids back to his house. And we had a curfew. I think it was 2 o'clock. I don't think we got back till 4. And in Poland, the legal age is 18. All these kids were 18 or over. And we made sure to take care. They had a little bit of l'chaim. And I remember Leib Levsky, he was his Einikel who was there. He was sitting at the table. Leib Levsky is a legendary Farbrengen, used to be at least, before he got not well. And nobody said a word. It was just Pinny and I. And we were hawking that. I can tell you that from all the kids that I know who were around that table, they were all from Yidden today. That was really, really a special Farbrengen. Good. And then the Shabbos was over, whatever it was. We went to the other places around Poland. Then we went to Israel for a week and we came back. Fast forward 3 months, it was Gimel Tamuz. Gimel Tamuz, I tell you the year. This is Tov Shin Samach Zayin. So yeah, 13 years ago. It was Gimel Tamuz, and I was at the oil like everybody else was at the oil. Spent the whole day there. I spent the whole day at the oil from early in the morning. I went to David Shachris there, and then to learn a mimer, to write the pond, stand on the line for hours, and then before and after. You know, that's the Gimel Tamuz routine. And I was leaving the oil. I left one of the tents. I walked out towards the street to go back. And lo and behold, took the exit that I was leaving. There was Eliezer Gerari, the Krakow Shliach. I said, hey, Eliezer, Shalom Aleichem, was machst du? I haven't seen you for 3 months. And then I look at him, and he does not look right. Madua paneichem roim hayom. Why? I said to him, you look terrible. He says, I feel terrible. I have a big problem. What's your problem? He says, I need to go back to Krakow. I said, oh, Krakow, that's where we had the big Farbrengen, and the Beis HaKvoros of the Ramah, and the Bach over there, the Tesis Yomtiv, and this dead shul, and that dead shul, and that standing memorial for what life used to be like. I started going through all the different things that we experienced in Krakow, and this Farbrengen that we had in his house, and like we were there for 1 or 2 days. And I suddenly realized, imagine this is a new shliach. He doesn't, it's in a new country with a new language. He doesn't have a penny to his name. And not only that, but he had some big struggles over there with the community. The community is of all of 100 people or something, 100 Yidden. And they were fighting him tooth and nail, still are. And, you know, he doesn't have a friend, and he doesn't have a little family, little kids. He had little children, and he's thinking to himself, it's the first time he came to the United States since he went out, and he's depressed. He's got to go back, and that's a big problem for a shliach who's just starting out with Mesiras Nefesh. And in my mind, it's all going through in my head. I'm saying to myself, there's a reason why I, of all people, went out of this exit to be able to meet with him, so I should be able to give him something, some kind of chizuk, some kind of inspiration. And what am I going to say? Just that, at that moment, coming from the street towards the oil was one of the Dera Shvi's great shluchim, Rabbi Yossi Lew, who Pashat enjoyed doing favors for another Yid, a person who invested himself in building some of the most beautiful moistus around the world. And I was very close with him. He's much older than me, about 10 years older than me, but I had a very close relationship. He had been in my house in Atlanta several times. Anyway, Yossi, Shalom Aleichem. So good to see. Oh, by the way, let me introduce you to the Shliach over here, the Shliach of Krakow, his garage. Oh, you're Gerari from Krakow? This morning, I was in a home in Borough Park, and this was an amical of the last chief rabbi of Krakow. Krakow had some very, very big, prominent rabbanim, like as I mentioned before, the Ramah himself, and the Bach, and the Tesis Yomtiv, and the Megala Amukas, Megina Shlema, all kinds of great names, the Eger family. Anyway, so it was known for their rabbanim were the big, Gedolei Yisrael. And this guy was, I don't know who the last chief rabbi was, but he said that I was in this guy's house, an amical from the last chief rabbi, and he said to me that I heard that Chabad moved to Krakow, and I want to donate a Sefer Torah, Le'ilin Nishmas, my grandfather. Yossi Lew says to Gerari, he says, do you need a Sefer Torah? He says, yeah. And then he says, oh, just the other day, I was, another thing, an amical from Krakow in New Jersey, and the guy wants to donate a significant amount of money for Chabad in Krakow. Well, do you need any money? Do you need money? He says. Ask a shliach, not somebody who was there for just 6 months. Ask a shliach who's been there for 600 years if they need any money. And Gerari says, yeah. And so he says, okay, here, he pulls out a notepad from his pocket, and he has in there the names and the addresses. He says, to this guy, if your father's in town, take your father with him, because he's the Ben Torah kind of person. The other guy, you don't need to take your father. These are the addresses. This is the name. This is the number. And go to these people, and they are exchanging this information. And I'm standing there, I could not believe. You should have seen the guy's face that changed from one end to another end. Mamish made it to see this guy how. Anyway, so Yossi Ratchik went on into the oil, and I turned around to Garari and I said to him, "Nu, was sagst du? What's your response to this?" So Garari said like this: I came to the oil today, and I found out that they're letting you. I wanted to pour my heart out. And I found out that you only have 2 minutes. And within the 2 minutes, they keep on reminding you, 30 seconds have passed, you have 1.5 minutes to go. You can't even concentrate and focus to do anything. It's just, it's a quick in and out. It's like getting $1 and going out. So he said, I decided I'm not writing a zettel. I can't stand there and read it. I stood at the oil in my 2 minutes, and I said over and over again, Rebbe, I need a Sefer Torah and I need money. That will make me happy. That's all I said. And before I leave the premise, they are both in my hands. And in case you might wonder if this is a true story, you could go to your favorite Chabad news site and put in 2009 Sefer Torah Krakow. And you'll see the pictures. In the meantime, Yossi Ratchik passed away, and the guy agreed to do the Sefer Torah in his memory. And they made it in 2009, Tovshin Samach Tes, right after Pesach. That kufa. I wasn't there in Krakow. That was the 1 year I did not go in the few years that I would go on this program. I was in Krakow about 3 years ago. And I was in the shul with Eliezer Gurari, and he comes over to me and says, I'm not sure you remember, but 10 years ago in Gimel Tamuz, I was at the oil. I said, stop. I said, you're not sure if I remember. It was a Meifus Goli that happened in front of my eyes. I can't even take the credit for it. I just introduced you to Yossi Ratchik, and the rest is history. Mamish set him up, by the way, he set him up on a path that Indian, he still lays from that Sefer Torah, and Baruch Hashem was able to straighten himself out. But that was a complete turnaround. And so the Nakuda of this Maisa is that when you Parshit call out from the bottom of your heart, you have a point by Yizaku al Hashem Batzar Lohem. It's Batzar, you're climbing walls, and you don't know how much more you can climb. You've done all Tzvos Meken. We have a Father, we have a Tata who looks at our Mesiras Nefesh, and the Tata says, listen here, Kinderlach, what do you need? Just tell me. Just keep me informed, and you'll see that I will come to help you. And so there's Eibishter helfen. I know we're talking about Mesiras Nefesh, your base Tamuz. Mesiras Nefesh is genug Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh we're too good at Mesiras Nefesh, unfortunately. Now we need to find a time where we should have taka, everything that we need, B'teiv, Anidav, and Nigla, Kipshutei Mamish. And that the most important thing that we need is that the Rebbe should come back and put an end to this Mesiras Nefesh tenure and an end to missing him, and we should be able to Farbrengen with the Rebbe, take it from Miyad Mamish. L'chaim.
L'chaim, Yossi, beautiful. L'chaim, l'chaim. By the way, Rabbi Alevsky, Chaim Baruch, posted the link for the Torah. I have actually a request on the chat. We're going to allow Rabbi Shapiro to conclude the Farbrengen. Again, there's no time, so you keep on going. We have over 300 people on. We almost hit 350 tonight. And I just want to say that I do have a request from somebody who wrote, can you ask Rabbi Shapiro to finish off the story from Odessa? I didn't notice that you didn't finish it, but the question is, can you ask Rabbi Shapiro to finish the story with the Sefer in Odessa? But Rabbi Shapiro, I'm not telling you what to speak. This is your platform. And again, I thank each and every one of you for joining and hope you will join Wednesday night for more. And I wanted to also say that we're going to conclude with a niggin. Rabbi Frankfurter, my partner and colleague, is going to finish off by posting and sharing a niggin so that it doesn't get all muffled like it did before. Rabbi Shapiro, a good yom tov, l'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim. You hear me?
We hear you, we hear you.
Okay. The truth is, the story I finished, what I mentioned that there's more to it is the whole hachana to it. When we came to Odessa, it was right after Purim. And that day, there were a few people that were there that were arrested because it was, they made, underground, they made a Purim spiel. And the KGB found out about it, and there were many people arrested. And because of that, the danger was much more. So we came there, we couldn't even talk. We came there, there was in the house a blackboard with chalk that we would like to write to each other. So in this house that I mentioned before, we managed to talk. But there was another house there, the name was I forgot already. They had arrested the father. So the communication took place by writing on the blackboard, and you erase it, and the people answered, and they said, because there's a car outside standing, picks up everything that we're talking. And this is talking those days in the MEMS. They pick up everything I'm talking, therefore we have to be very careful. Later, the news in America had the news that there was in Odessa a whole incident, and I was there then. So, the fear that was there, I didn't want to go into the detail, but the fear that was there to come there, and especially with that book, to come there was, there were raids in a few houses that people arrested. They came in, they tore off the mezuzahs from the houses, the KGB, and they looked through the cabinet, any food that was there that came from Israel, that had Yiddish words, they took it away. And it was very terrible. But we came in, we had matzah shmura that we brought along to give to people. So we gave this guy a box of matzah, 2 pounds of matzah. This person, his name was Kaufman actually. And the simcha that he had, that he's able to have shmura matzah, is unbelievable. So being there was living through Pasha, the matzah the way it was, that the fear that they had, just to continue in this line, one of the Farbrengens that we had many Farbrengens in different people's houses. One of the Farbrengens, there was a man there, actually spoke Yiddish, but he spoke like a Polish Yiddish. And he says, L'chaim to me. He says, L'chaim, L'chaim, the Eibishter soll helfen, soll rauskriegen von dannen. And then he thinks, he says, I believe you'll get out. He thought it made me feel good. Imagine he's telling me, I think you'll get out. Not sure, but I hope you'll get out. So the fear that was there, the coming into Russia was very hard. In other words, the customs, it took us 2.5 hours by the customs. Every little thing that we brought in, they checked. As a matter of fact, I even bought a book in English, a tourist book for Russia. And I had that Rebbe's a picture and I put it into the book. And they looked through every page. So he was looking and looking with his hands, finger, and I saw he's going to get to that picture. I didn't know what's going to happen. He'll see the picture. And as he's moving his hands, a guy calls him. So he turns around and his fingers continued moving and the picture passed and it went through. Other things they didn't let us take through. We had to, in order to get there, to bring. So we brought along, I'll give you an example. We brought along ink for a sefer. What did we do? We bought shoe polish, emptied it out, and put ink for a sefer into the bottle as if we're taking shoe polish. Tzitzis. We took the tzitzis and we made it into a roll, and my wife bought 2 needles, and it was crocheting needles, and this is big for crocheting. Everything had to be done in such a way. And they took away any svarim that we brought. They took away. But anyway, it was the body search, everything. So we saw right as soon as we came down the plane, I could tell you when we went down the steps into the airport. First of all, the airport was very dim, dark, and there were soldiers standing with machine guns, like that. It reminded me of what it said. The Friedrich Rebbe writes when he was in Spalerke, and he went how dark it was, and he describes it. This is exactly how you felt. But the Mesiras Nefesh that they had, as I was saying before, Baruch Hashem, now we don't need it. And as Rabbi Lew was saying, Baruch Hashem, we shouldn't have to have the Mesiras Nefesh, but they had it. But the feeling they had, when we went to Leningrad, I was by a chasana there. I was Mesadek Dushim by a chasana because they waited for guests because the people there were afraid to Mesadek Dushim because it was illegal. In the middle of the chasana, I got a message that before we leave, when we come back to Moscow, before we leave, there's a certain person that needs us to call him to get a message to him. He has to speak to us. Something important. What was it? We got back to Moscow, and Yetcha called him, and his mother answered. It was a bocher. And the mother answered that he is sick with high fever, but nevertheless he'll take the train and he'll come to the house to see us. We came to that. What was his thing? He had a box of matzah from last year, and it was laying. No one touched it. But you never know. It wasn't put away in the Pesach place. Can you eat it on Pesach? So I said, if no one touched it, no one touched it. And in Russia, how do they have the matzah, the kosher matzah? So he says, I said, it's okay. So he says to me, are you saying it because of me, because I'm in Russia, or you be'etzim saying it? So I said, take away the top matzah and don't use it. I'm just going to bring out the Mesiras Nefesh that they had. It was something that, it's unbelievable. One of the places I came to learn, before we came in, the person, the young man that was with me, that was walking with me, he calls his house from the payphone because the head of the KGB the wife said, before he left, he saw that the head of the KGB from that area was walking around. So they were afraid that he picked up that there is something going to happen because on the phone they made arrangements about the shir. He picked up and he's afraid. So he called his wife first to see if he's still around, and he wasn't, so we walked. And when we came there, we sat down, I gave a shir and Gemara, it wasn't even Farbrengen. A shir and Gemara, Masechta Ksubas. And in the middle, there was a knock on the door. Right away, everything was put away, nothing. And the pilot was a latecomer to the shir, but we got so scared. My wife, the first night, gave a shir to the women. So we made up on the phone that she should stand at this corner, and a lady will walk by with a red scarf. That's all. She'll just pass by. You follow behind her. Stay away, but follow behind her. And when you came, so that's what you did. She followed, you couldn't talk. And when they came to the building, she took her under her coat. And they took her into her apartment under her coat, into her back room. And she said, I'm afraid, in the house, I'm afraid of my mother-in-law. Just to bring out the way they lived then, and they learned, and they davened. So this is the Mesiras Nefesh that they had, and we don't need the Mesiras Nefesh, but we have to learn from that we have to do. And everything that Rabbi Lew said is gehalten, I'm telling you. Just to mention, when they gave the Nun Nigen, Baruch Hashem, I had the schus, I was there, not by all. The first time I was there was Tovshin Yud Ches, because I didn't live in New York, we lived in Cleveland. So the first Farbrengen that I came to the Rebbe was for some Chastei Tovshin Chai. I was in Yechidus, Tovshin Yud Gimel, when we came from Europe, moved to America. Elo Tovshin Yud Gimel, I was in Yechidus, I was a kid. But then for the first time, my father took me along, was for Simchas Torah Tovshin Chai. And the interesting part of is, Mod Nezach, the Rebbe would give Lekach, Hishana Rabba. To those that didn't get Erev Yom Kippur, he would give Hishana Rabba. So I was standing with my father in line to take Lekach from the Rebbe. And the line wasn't as big as later, obviously, but still, it's Hishana Rabba. After the davening and there was a big, long line, and it's no time to stop and talk. But when we came over to get Lekach, the Rebbe turns around to me and says, what did you learn lately? In the middle of the line of Lekach. So I said, I learned Mesichta Beya. So then the Rebbe says to me, what halachas did you learn? which later I realized he probably meant which halacha in Masechta Beis, I imagine. But I didn't understand, so I said Hilchas Shofar. That's what we learned last halacha. So the Rebbe asks me, how many keilas do you have to blow on Rosh Hashanah? So I said, 100. So the Rebbe asked me these words. This that we blow 100 keilas, is this Medina de Gemara or not? Is it from the Gemara's time or not? I didn't know. But everyone was surprised. In the middle of the line of Lekach, the Rebbe is learning and asking a kasha in halachas. Anyway, but that was the first time I was there, first in Chastere. The first Bechal Farbrengen I was there. And that time was Shamil's Nigen. And I was there. And from then on, from Tov Shin Chai till the end, till Tov Shin Chav Dalet, which was the last time the Rebbe sang the Nigen. So the tziyur of, you described it, is the tziyur was so special. A whole year you waited for the new Nigen. After the Rebbe taught the new Nigen and waiting already, what's going to be next year? The tziyur was, it changed when it came to the, like I think Chav Gimel. It used to be that the Rebbe came out, it was after the Farbrengen, there was a Farbrengen, started around 9 o'clock, went about to 12:30 or something, 9:30. Then there was Hakofes, lasted till 3:30. Then the Rebbe went upstairs to eat the Suda by the apartment of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And after the Suda, that's when the Rebbe came down. And the Rebbe came down, so those beginning, it was the first time that it happened, didn't even expect it. That's why it was like this, but I wasn't there. But this time, there was in middle of the shul. It wasn't where the Rebbe but the Farbrengen. It was in middle of the shul. The shul was only the first part of the shul. In middle of the shul, there was a few milk boxes, and on top of the milk boxes, there was a board. And the Rebbe stood on top of that, and the Rebbe was giving l'chaim for those who are makabel upon themselves a heisofa in limud achsidus. And while he was doing this, he was singing the nigen. And he would usually say something about the nigen. So I remember when he saw Shamil's nigen, remember when he sang the nigen Stavya Pitu, that was a very hard nigen. It's a hard nigen because it's not Russian. No one understood the words. It's not Russian. It's not Ukrainian. It's a psamishmash. It's not, the language is not so clear. And it's a lot of words, and it's a complicated nigen. That's why after Yontif, the Rebbe gave out a piece of paper with the words in Hebrew letters. Not the Rebbe's Ksav, but I think they say that Rebbe wrote it. That's what they said then. I didn't see the Ksav Yad. That gave out a paper with the words. And this is the famous one that what the Rebbe used to do, he used to sing the nigen, then ask Rabbi Yael to sing over. He asked Rabbi Moshe Tolashevsky, and people would sing, and the Rebbe would sing it again. Then the next night, when there was the big Farbrengen, the Rebbe would repeat and usually sing again the nigen. So by Stavya Pitu, I remember, this is Tov Shech Gimel, Stavya Pitu, the Rebbe sang it, and it was hard to catch. By the next night, by the Farbrengen, the Rebbe sang it over again, but I remember the way he did it. He sang it, and when he got to the words, so he came to the words, and he stopped, and he said, Das meint me mir und dir und dir und dir, oh davati. He pointed actually at three people. He didn't mean these specifically people, I guess. He meant like all three parts of the shul. I remember the last time when he came down to sing the nigen, this was Tov Shin Chav Dalet. So when the Rebbe walked down, and right in the beginning, I saw that it's going to be over, that this is the last time. You could see it. He came down, and the first thing he started saying, that you should know that this is mashke that I'm giving is not for everybody. It's only for those who take upon themselves a hisof and limud achsidus. Because what used to happen, everybody got into the line. Even little kids were standing in the line. After the Rebbe said this, what the Rebbe expected is that somebody from the Vadam Sadir would take care that little kids, they shouldn't, it's not for them. It's not, for some reason, no one did it. And the Rebbe started giving, and he looked and you saw that the Rebbe was upset. And then the Rebbe said that, as I said before, it's only for those who accept upon themselves a hisof in chassidus. And nothing happened. The Rebbe said, I just don't remember if it was 6 or 7. He said it was a quarter to, in one Asofik, was it the quarter to 6 already in the morning or a quarter to 7? And the Rebbe said, when the time will be, I think he said 7 o'clock, but it sounds like too late. Maybe he said 6 o'clock, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop giving. And the Rebbe said, und jetzt wird man sehen, was wird sein, I'm quoting the words, was wird sein mit die alle Chachomim, was warten allemal bis ins Sof. Because he's going to stop in the middle. And we'll see what will be with those Chachomim that are waiting, that always wait till the end. And it's exactly what happened. When the clock struck, the clock across struck, I think it was 7, but it makes me a suffix. Maybe it was 6. The Rebbe put down the becher, and he stopped giving. But he taught the nigen. While he was giving, he taught the nigen. So first he taught the nigen, Kiona Amecha, the new Kiona Amecha. Kiona Amecha. It was called the new one because it was after the old one. And then when he finished, he said, next year, whether there's going to be a new nigen or not, it's a suffix. Therefore, I'm going to teach another nigen. And that's when the Rebbe taught the nigen of Hualakenu as a second nigen. I remember when the Rebbe was teaching the nigen, and he was trying, and he said, Yechiel the Chazan used to be the one who used to sing it. It was a known nigen in Lubavitch. It wasn't a new nigen. Everyone knew the nigen. Maybe it was a little different twist. He would put it to the words of Hualakenu. And the Rebbe started singing the nigen and trying to put it into the words. It seems like he hadn't practiced before to put it into the words. That's where the ay comes from. How does the ay there? Ay. Why is it there? You could fit it in. But the Rebbe was trying, and the Rebbe said, I don't remember the words by heart. He took a siddur and opened the siddur, started saying it with the siddur, and he taught the nigen, and people say, but that people caught very fast. The next night by the Farbrengen, when they sang it over, the Rebbe asked Moshe Dolashevsky to sing it over. Moshe Dolashevsky already had time to fit it into the words properly, so he sang it without the ay. So he sang it solo, and then the whole Eilam sang. When the whole Eilam sang, they sang it with the ay. So when the Eilam finished, the Rebbe turns around to Moshe Dolashevsky and he says, why don't you sing it with the ay like everybody else? And in my mind, again, it's everyone can say their own svaras. It looked like the ay came in, not because the Rebbe planned to make the ay. But nevertheless, if that's how it came out, by the Rebbe, that's true, that's how it has to stay. Even though when the Rebbe davened for the Omed himself, usually he did not say the ay. But I think that's a different thing. Because when the Rebbe davened for the Omed, Kedusha is the middle of Shemon Esrei. Chazoros Hashatz is Shemon Esrei. So he didn't want the middle of Shemon Esrei to say the ay. I mean, other people do that. Chazonim always do that. But by the Rebbe, middle of Shemon Esrei, he wouldn't. He wouldn't make with his hands then. Like this, always the Rebbe would make his hands. But if he davened for the Omed, he didn't make. I remember the first time that he davened for the Omed after he taught the Snigen, we were standing the Bachrim there, and we were talking amongst ourselves that the Rebbe is definitely not going to make with them. How do we know if he wants to sing it or not? Like this, not every time they sang Hu Alekenu. Later it became a weekly thing, but not always. So we didn't know what's going to be. Will he want it or not? But he's not going to make. I said clearly. So I said, no, he could make it. I said, no, he's not going to make it with his hands. In the middle of Shemon Esrei, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to make anything. It's Shemon Esrei. Chazor Hashem is a regular Shemon Esrei with all the dinim of Shemon Esrei. The came back at Lepel, he didn't make with his hands. But we were standing up front, so we, a few Machaveda, we started singing, taking a chance. The people further on didn't see, so they don't know. They heard singing. So everyone's saying. But we didn't know. And the Rebbe repeated, he sang it, so we knew the Rebbe was happy. But I think the reason he didn't say the ay, because in the middle of Shemon Esrei, he didn't want. But L'chila then, the Rebbe said to make the ay. Why? Because even though, and maybe I'm wrong, but even though it seemed like, just because he couldn't fit it into the words, it didn't do this, that's why he's saying it. But the Rebbe Sazeh given, Bam Rebbe, Ida Sazeh, which reminds me, Kute Sichas once, there was a Sicha that the Rebbe said, it was on Pirkei Avos. Then, Pirkei Avos, there's between Pesach and Shavuos, then there's later. So that year, in the Kute Sichas, it was actually in the Teichen and Yonim yet, they took after Shavuos, every Shabbos was a Sicha on Pirkei Avos. So they took the Sicha on that Perek that the Rebbe said 6 weeks before and gave it into the Rebbe Magia. The Rebbe was Magia the Sicha and crossed out a certain line, two lines that he said by the Farbrengen, but he crossed it out. You know the Rebbe was Magia the Sicha twice. The second time, the Rebbe put it back in. Shabbos by Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke about it, and most people didn't understand what he's saying because they didn't know the ins and outs. But the Rebbe said that the Chatchila, he said this, but then he realized that it's not true. It's a mistake he made in the Inyan that he said. So I crossed it out. But then the Rebbe said, but I started thinking to myself that I said it in public, and I said it b'fnei kama asiris miYisrael, so it has to be true. And he started thinking, yeah, and he explained how the whole thing is true. And that's why he said I put it back. So what did I see here? That even though the Rebbe, what did he think? It doesn't seem like it's right, but if he said it, there's no mistake. So you got to think deeper. The same thing I was thinking about this ayayay, that he wanted it to be with ayayay. He said clearly, but that's going back to the tziyur of the new nigen. By the new nigen, the seder that was there, it was something very special. I wasn't here by Rachamona. So someone said, like people told me, I don't know, I can't say that by Rachamona, when Salishevsky started repeating it, so he started singing it with chazonis. Rachamona, with chazonis. So the Rebbe turned around to him. I'm telling it, I don't know exactly how it was, but that's what they say. The Rebbe said to him, "Wenn Oni steht bei Pesach, singt nicht kein chazonis. Rachamona de Oni Rani, Oni steht and expects money, singt nicht kein chazonis." It's not. But the Rebbe would say, when the gay Rabbi Yale, everyone said, "No, Rabbi Zalman Duchma sagt, as Rabbi Yale can chazer nanigen. Not only can chazer asicha, can chazer nanigen also. Can the chushin negina." So the Rebbe would ask him to repeat it. But the whole tziyur, I remember once by Ata v'chartonu, the Sholem Arozov, and when he was laying on the floor under the Rebbe's feet, and he was like making noise because he was drunk, and people tried to push him away, and the Rebbe said, lost him. Okay, he was a special person. If Sholem Arozov was a Goan Elam, and he was a Chassid, and he made the nemes. But the whole tziyur, so like I said, it was in the middle of the shul, but I think it was from Chopshin Chav Beis on. I think they changed it. The Rebbe would do it from the place of his Farbrengen, but he was standing the whole time. He wasn't sitting. Asking where was his hands. He wasn't sitting. He was standing. It's always before. And then also, when he did it in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe was standing the whole time when he was giving the mashke, and he was singing the nigen, and that there was some kind of connection. Remember when he sang the nigen Anim Zmiris, and he told the story about this guy, Polish Chassid, who was Matzim keeper, standing there a whole night and singing this nigen. So it was always Akdome. Anyway, when the Rebbe, just in the finish, when the Rebbe spoke about stopping to be Magil Likutei Sichos, Tovshin Lamed, Simchas Tovshin Lamed Beis, he said there are a few things that he stopped, and he was really like upset why no one bothered him about it. One of the things he said was he stopped giving Chanukah geld to the Bochrim. He used to give Chanukah geld every Chanukah, and the Fifth Licht he used to give it for the Bochrim Mulam Chassidus. He said he stopped saying by Morim. Like this used to be a Maimer every Shabbos Mevorchim, and every day with the Pagre. And that year, Tovshin Chof Hey, the Rebbe stopped and he only said something, not always. And he used the Loshen, and what I do is, I chaparai na Maimer ke'en siche. Siche ke'en Maimer, I don't know which word he used. But it was an expression that I felt good about because it was, we who wrote the Hanochas made up that expression. Where did it come with the expression, Maimer ke'en siche, or siche ke'en Maimer, whichever we did. We made it up. We wanted to say it's a Maimer, but it's not a real, not a Maimer. So the Rebbe said, chaparai na Maimer ke'en siche. And then also one of the things is about the Naya Nigen, that he had to stop it. And now also you see timing that it's stopping the Sichos. And the Rebbe complained why no one bothered, no one cared. I don't know if no one cared or not. He wrote to the Rebbe, not, Weiss is not. But the Rebbe, in other words, himself felt bad, and he stopped it. And like I said before, why did he stop it? Because the whole thing was during the time when he's giving the mashke for Chassidus, and it didn't. The people were continuing, the kids were continuing in the line, and the Rebbe was, you could see, wasn't so happy then. When it came the year later, after Hakofes, the Rebbe said, like I said last year, that there's not going to be a new nigen. Therefore, he started. I hear there's the Chalukah days exactly which nigen he started, but he said, like I said last year, there's not going to be the new nigen. And another thing, we were wondering when it came to Yom Kippur, which Kiona Amecha does the Rebbe want us to sing? Till then, they sang always the old Kiona Amecha. Now that the Rebbe taught, so I'm telling you what I think. It's my own, what I observed. I was waiting, and I looked, standing there, looking at the Rebbe, what's going to happen? I think that the Rebbe wanted a new one. But the people don't know. The crowd in the back doesn't see, doesn't know. So they don't know. So everyone started the old and the Rebbe continued that, made his hands. Father, what makes me say nak? Because I looked at the Rebbe when it came to Kiona Amecha, this is what the Rebbe did. Like that. Not like this. In other words, Kionu Amecha. It looked like it. But I'm telling you like this. The play in where the Rebbe, a lot of times like that. If it didn't go, you can't dict. It's not. Anyway, but this is something which I want to just confirm that waiting for the new nigun was a moment that everybody was waiting for, something special. Now, could be that the specialty of this, why everyone was waiting for that, is not because of the Nefesh Elokis, maybe because of Nefesh Abamis. The Nefesh Elokis maybe should be Kiyas, because it was so geschmack. It was such an enjoyable thing. See, you can't say Kiyas was enjoyable. Kiyas was Halik. Hakofes was also enjoyable, a different type. It's a Hakofes. This one had a special episode, a special Tainug, Tiranigan and the Nunigan. It's more even Poshe Begashmi is for the person. It's geschmack. So could be that, and also because it's anyway, the bottom line is the Stammers of the Welt and the Stammers of Shin Pei. And we heard everything from Rabbi Lew. It's after Gimel Tamuz, 26 after Gimel Tamuz, on Sigei Tomit and ganzen Sturm, and we're able to. And he brought out the point. I just, when they gave the videos and the pictures, as always, we gave videos. Of them passed to sagen exactly what it says in the Medrash. Lehoya ha'elam royo leishtamish bezov. Leinitno zov, leinivra zov, ela bishvil beis hamikdash. And the Rebbe writes, Hagam, till they build the Beis Hamikdash with Zov. You know how many Avodah Zaras were made with Zov? They use the Zov, but that's their Bechira. Abish doesn't take away Bechira. But the whole purpose is, I think the whole Metzias, why is there such a thing as videos? Is because of this, because of after Gimel Tammuz. I too, you know what they could use videos, the internet, the Facebook can use them about. The Zov was also used, Poshet for Avodah Zarah, for all kinds of things. But the purpose was the Beis Hamikdash. It's the purpose that we have things that we could see. It's like only a demus, only a shadow. But it gives you some feeling that could give you. So it's something that's very important. So we just want to second the motion and finish off with that. So l'chaim, l'chaim.
Rabbi Shapiro, we're not necessarily finished yet. This is unlimited Zoom.
I know, but Rabbi Lew could continue.
We could go till B'dikas Chometz if you want, but we actually have a question, and we could maybe wait till the next Yom of the Pagra. I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, tonight was really very special. It was priceless. And for those who want to hear more Rabbi Shapiro, there's a zichronis. I think you've been slacking off a little bit. I haven't gotten in a couple of weeks. Unless you
slacking off, I stopped. It stopped when it stopped with the corona. I stopped it. I was busy. So then, when he stopped, hey,
the Rebbe wouldn't let you stop. I'm not letting you stop. So now I'm telling you, Rabbi Shapiro, start giving, because it's something I look forward to. I listen in the car. I really thank you tonight. I was asked about tonight's sharing this Farbrengen. It was recorded. You could go onto the Facebook, Chabad of Florida, Facebook, and watch the recording, or it'll be on YouTube later. I'm going to share it as well, and probably get COL and Crown Heights Info to share it as well. I want to just, last thing for me, is when you talked about the shoe polish and all that, I was actually in Eretz Achim, one of the ones who packed up the shoe polish, and I never looked at your shoes. But I think since I emptied out that shoe polish, Rabbi Tannenhaus has not polished the shoe since. That I know. And I remember taking the film out and putting in little mezuzahs. So it was, but these times are over. That Mesiras Nefesh, as you know, There was an article recently, Stalin over Schneerson. We know that, Kanai Nahara with the work of the Shluchim worldwide, today throughout the Soviet Union, where it was used to be Mesiras Nefesh, today it's flourishing and growing. And in Mirz Hashem, we should be Zoiche for all of us to be together, not on Zoom, and we should be together with the Rebbe, with the Gula Shleima. Today's the Chag HaGula, so what better day for the Rebbe to come, and we should have Mashiach here in the Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi. Thank you. I thank everybody for joining. I just allowed the share, so Yisrael, if you want to finish off with a niggin, you can share the niggin. And I guess we will we'll wait for the next. The question, so you could note it, Rabbi Shapiro, is the question was asked. They wanted to know the relationship that your father had with the Frierdiker Rebbe. That was going to be the next question. So if you want to share a word or two before Rabbi Frankfurter, before Rabbi Yisrael shares it, if you have just 30, 60, 120 seconds, I'm in no rush. And then afterwards, you'll share the thing and the niggin. And I wish everybody l'chaim. Agud Yom Tov.
All I can say is when I gave that we found a letter in the Rebbe's library, actually, a letter that my father wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe in the year Tov Reish Tzadik Beis, I think. And the way he writes the letter, Mamish, the Achsidische Bocher, Betretna Faraveden, this it's Mamish refreshing that, and that's a letter he wrote when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Riga, and he wrote it from Russia. He was in Leningrad, and then later he was. My mother was from Katrinaslav, obviously. Her father was the Rebbe's Melamed, and then he was in Samarkand and in Tashkent. Oh, but he from there as a Bocher, he wrote a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe in Riga, and asked. But the way you see the way a Bocher would write in those years. And that's the years when the Mesiras Nefesh was in Mamish, every little thing that he did. He told me he used to walk around many times with a scarf around his face as if he has a toothache because he had a beard. He was from those many Bochim cut off their beards because of Sakone. He never did, but he used to cover it. But the way he wrote, that's one of the things, the Achas of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's one thing that to us is very, very special. Anyway, but next time, Yirtz Hashem.
Okay, listen, Rabbi Shapiro, start the Zechronis again. I also, one last thing is, I remember when my friend, colleague Moshe Moskowitz went to Kharkov. So he went into the shul and there was an old man in the corner and he said, Mistamer Reb Sholem Ber is avek, was macht sein Sohn Reb Yosef Yitzchok? I remember, but
I heard somebody who came out of Russia, not a real Lubavitcher, came out of Russia and in Toshin Lamed Aleph. So he went to Farbrengen. So he says, he told my father, der Lubavitcher Rebbe guckt ist ein bisschen anders, wie ich habe ihn gesehen in Russland.
Anyhow, big yashikayach to all. And the Mirz Hashem will stay tuned for future Farbrengens and Shiurim. And hopefully, like I said, Chag HaGola, it should happen so we don't have to do this virtual. We could give each other a course and an Alachaim in person. Rabbi Yisrael, take it away. A gute Nacht, a gute Woche, everybody.
Thank you very much. A good
Everybody,
Tavach. A good Yom Tov.
Rabbi Shapiro, really, Rabbi Lew, thank you so much. And again, we should be zeichet only everything good.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. A gute Woche and a good afreilige Yom Tov.